let this slide. My name is Tracy. I work at a big company. The job isn't glamorous, but I have great colleagues, including my boss, so I like it here. The work can get busy during the peak season, but I never feel stressed because we all help each other out. Our teamwork makes it easier to handle. My parents often worry about me working too much and always ask, "When are you getting married?" I usually tell them the same thing, "I'm not ready yet, and I don't want to rush." They just sigh and shake their heads at me. Things changed after my company threw a big party. I don't usually feel comfortable in social situations, but I went because it was part of my job. The dinner was great, but the crowd made me feel dizzy, so I went outside to get some fresh air. While I was enjoying the breeze, I heard a man's voice. It took me a second to realize someone was talking to me. "Oh, sorry. I was lost in thought," I said. The guy standing there looked ordinary, but friendly. "Are you antisocial?" he asked bluntly. His question made it easier for me to be honest. "Yeah, I like working more," I said with a small smile. He shyly replied, "Same here." I thought I was the only one who didn't want to socialize. He seemed more comfortable now and started talking to me. His name was John, and we talked about our jobs and shared interests in travel and movies. He loved films, especially old Hollywood ones. "I prefer watching movies at home rather than going out with a bunch of people," I said. "Me too," he said excitedly. Then he added, "Oops. I haven't met anyone who likes talking about this stuff, so I got a little carried away." He seemed embarrassed, but I thought he was cute. We kept talking on the balcony and exchanged numbers before the night ended. I usually don't give my number to guys unless it's for work, but he was different. He made me feel comfortable talking to him. One day at work, and suddenly asked me, "Are you dating someone now?" I froze. She didn't seem to notice my confusion and kept talking. "Because you've been wearing cute outfits to the office, I'm guessing you're seeing someone special after work." I wasn't sure what she meant by dating. "I'm not sure if we're dating, but we have a lot in common. We watch movies and have dinner together, that's it." She gave me a confused look, then rolled her eyes. "That's called dating," she said, as if she could tell what I was thinking, like I had just realized it. She laughed and said, "I'm happy you're happy." I had been so focused on my work for so long that I hadn't even thought about what we were doing. Being with John felt so natural that I didn't worry about labels. John and I had a smooth relationship. It wasn't full of intense drama like in movies, but it was relaxed, and we enjoyed peaceful time together. Eventually, we got engaged. Even though my job kept me busy, John never complained. My colleagues were happy for me and supported me continuing to work after the wedding. We started planning our wedding and invited our friends and colleagues. John's parents were quiet and reserved, just like him. His dad was polite and said little, while his mom was dependable, but not loud. When we had dinner to introduce our families, it wasn't like our parents became best friends, but it was still a nice, calm gathering. But my mom looked worried. Later that night, when I asked her what was wrong, she said, "You might have trouble with John's mom later. But John is a good guy, so I hope he'll handle it." I didn't think much of it at the time, but eventually, I understood what she meant. Our wedding and honeymoon were amazing. I had always wanted to visit Rome after watching Roman Holiday. We couldn't sit or eat at the Spanish Steps where Audrey Hepburn had gelato, but just climbing up the stairs was a dream come true. We went during the off-season, but there were still a lot of tourists taking pictures. After we came back and started settling into married life, my work got even busier. I had told John's parents that my job gets really hectic around the holidays, so I might not be able to take time off. When John and I visited his parents, I told them I'd miss the first Christmas with them. John's dad said, "We don't really celebrate big, so don't worry. Just visit us when you have time." His mom agreed, but I could tell she wanted to say more. While I was helping her in the kitchen, I realized she still had old-fashioned views about women staying home and doing housework. When John came into the kitchen to help, his mom said, "Cooking is a woman's job. Go relax in the living room." She sent him away, but of course, I wasn't allowed to relax. I told myself it was better than her expecting me to do everything myself. I never thought I'd be treated this way by my mother-in-law. She looked at me while chopping carrots and said, I don't understand. I had to ask, what's wrong? She lowered her voice so only I could hear. You can't take Christmas off, can you? That's rude, and I'm sure my husband is upset, she whispered. I was shocked by her sudden change in attitude. It was so unexpected. As she kept chopping, she lectured me. Why didn't you quit your job after getting married? I hope you're not planning to keep working long term. I was flustered and replied, I haven't decided yet. John and I talked about it, and we both plan to keep working for a while, I stammered. She looked at me disapprovingly. You don't look like a successful career woman. Wouldn't it be better for your company if you just quit? What did she know about me? I felt my anger rising, but she was already setting the table for dinner. She went back to being normal in front of everyone. I remembered what my mom had said when she first met John's mom. What's wrong, honey? John asked, snapping me out of my thoughts. I started bringing food to the dining room. John's mom pretended nothing had happened. Are you tired from cooking? I bet you're too busy with work to cook at home. My mom quickly defended me. Even though she's busy, she makes sure we eat well and cooks balanced meals. Don't tell me you're bullying her. Of course not, I'm just worried about her, she replied, changing her tone. I was surprised by how fast she shifted her behavior. John's dad said, let's eat, and we all started dinner. The next morning, John and I left. I probably looked upset, so John asked, are you okay? I didn't want to bring up anything that might cause tension, so I said, it's nothing, I'm just a little tired from work. I tried to cover up my feelings. Oh, sorry you didn't get to relax much with my parents visiting on your days off. Seeing John's concerned face made me feel even worse. I didn't want to drag him into this, it wasn't fair to him. My in-laws didn't live with us or visit often, so I thought I only had to deal with her occasionally, but I was wrong. After our last visit, she started calling me every week. She would ask about John or make sure I wasn't slacking on housework. I tried not to think much of it, but eventually, it started stressing me out. I still couldn't bring myself to talk to John about it. One day, she called again. As soon as I answered, she said, my birthday is coming up next month. I had forgotten about it. Oh, right, what would you like to do? I asked. I don't need a birthday celebration, she replied quickly, then rushed on without letting me speak. My husband suggested a short family trip. The idea of a trip made me a little excited, but it didn't last long when she continued. Thank you for the invite. Are you joking? I guess you'll be invited since it's a family trip, she said sarcastically, but you're not coming with us. You annoy me, got it? Make up an excuse, blame it on work, and don't join us. I'll let you plan the trip, though. That was it. I finally let my anger show. I see, whatever you say. Watch your tone with me, she yelled, but I hung up on her. I followed her instructions and booked flights and a nice hotel for their trip, without me. The morning of the trip, I told John the first had to take care of something small at work and cancelled my flight. He seemed disappointed. Well, if it's work, I understand. I'll miss you. Let me know if you need anything, he said sweetly. I felt a little guilty, but only because of how it would affect John. I ended up going to work as I had said. I considered doing something on my own, but I knew I'd just end up feeling negative. It was better to keep busy. My assistant made a big mistake that day, so everyone, including me, was running around trying to fix it. I didn't even have time to text John. By the time we finished, it was already getting dark. Phew, good job, Tracy. It's so late. Is your husband okay? One of my coworkers asked. Yeah, I told him I might be busy today, I replied, feeling relieved. I remembered to check my phone for any messages from John. There were several missed calls and texts. They were supposed to return the next day. While I was reading the messages, my phone suddenly vibrated. I stepped into the hallway and answered. You need to explain this. What did you do? My mother-in-law screamed so loudly that her voice probably echoed through the office. Calm down, please, I'm still at work, I said, trying to get her to lower her voice. She didn't care and kept yelling. Some coworkers poked their heads out of their offices, but as soon as they saw me, they quickly closed the doors. How do you know the GM of this hotel? She shouted. She explained that when John checked in, the staff had mentioned that the booking had been for 3 people. She was too late to stop them, and John and his dad asked her about it. She ended up confessing everything to them. I took a deep breath and explained calmly, I work in the travel industry. The hotel was struggling at one point, so I helped them with marketing. I've known the GM since then because the hotel became popular for its great service and scenic views. People started visiting because it looked great on social media. She was silent, her breathing heavy. I could imagine how upset she was. The GM asked us why we were having a family trip without you. You arranged all of this, didn't you? No, it's peak season. I didn't think he'd have time for this, I said, acting innocent. The GM and I have a good relationship. Last time I was there for work, I mentioned I got married and changed my last name. John's last name is unusual, so the GM must have noticed. I heard John approaching. I heard John's voice in the background, and then he took the phone from his mom. I'm really sorry, honey, I had no idea what my mom was doing to you. Don't worry, babe, I didn't tell you either. The GM gave me a lecture and told me to take really good care of you. He said it's rare to meet someone as compassionate as you. I feel like I was being lectured by your dad. I laughed at his comment. The GM was about the same age as my dad, and he had a daughter who was married, so maybe he felt personally involved. I'll see you tomorrow. We need to talk about this. Love you, hon. We hung up, and after they came back, we had a family meeting at John's parents' house. My mother-in-law had never been interested in my job, so she didn't know that John's company was one of my clients. The GM had told John that if he didn't treat me well, the hotel would reconsider its contract with his company. The GM said it'll affect your performance review, John told her. That's when my mother-in-law finally realized that she had messed up. She felt deeply regretful, though it probably didn't have a big impact on his career. She had no work experience, so she believed it completely. During the meeting, she looked small and guilty. I'll never take a trip with you again. I'll only go with Tracy from now on, John said firmly. She tried to defend herself. Please forgive me. I'll tell the GM I'll never bully Tracy again. But John cut her off. This isn't about my work. If you can't treat Tracy nicely, I won't speak to you again. She started crying. I'm really disappointed to know you're such a terrible person, John's dad said to her. Then she took my hands and apologized. I'm really sorry, please forgive me. I will never do such horrible things again. Honestly, I wasn't fully convinced by her words. We'll see what your actions show from now on, I said. John added, I've been too oblivious. I'll keep an eye on things now. Then he turned to me. I'm sorry again. I won't let her do whatever she wants anymore. He pulled me into a tight hug. I'm sorry too. I can't believe she did that, my father-in-law said, hugging me as well. I felt a huge sense of relief. From that point on, my mother-in-law stopped making rude comments about my work and calling me to criticize me. All contact with her went through John, and there were no more complaints about when I could or couldn't visit. I even felt like she started respecting my work. John told his dad, who had never done chores at home, you need to start helping mom with housework. He struggled with cooking, but he helped with cleaning and started showing more appreciation for his wife. The mood in the house was much lighter. Did you worry I was going to take my mom's side? John asked me one day. I told him honestly, I didn't want to cause a rift between you and your mom. I'm glad we turned this into a better situation for our family. Thank you, hon, he said, kissing me on the forehead. 3 months after the family trip, the 4 of us stayed at the same hotel. It's still popular, I said happily to the GM. It's because of you, he replied with a shy smile. My mother-in-law apologized to him. I'm so sorry for what happened. I've been scolded by my family, and I deeply regret it. I apologize for causing you any worry. John has been a very good husband. The GM looked at us warmly and said, Tracy saved this hotel and me, so please, take care of her. He sounded like my own dad, and in that moment, I realized how much I was valued by others. I felt really grateful. The trip turned out even better than I imagined. I'd been to the hotel many times for work, so I was able to show my family some hidden spots. We all had a great time, and it was one of the perks of my job and my efforts. In the future, my in-laws and I would keep a respectful distance, but we maintained a good relationship.
Joanna, sweetie, when are you going to find yourself a good man? I nearly choked on my coffee, caught off guard by Mom's sudden question. We were sitting in her cozy kitchen, sunlight streaming through the lace curtains she'd hung years ago. It was our weekly Sunday brunch tradition we'd kept since Dad passed away 5 years ago. Mom, please. Please, I sighed, setting down my mug. We've been through this. I'm happy with my life as it is. She reached across the table, patting my hand. I know, honey, but I worry about you. You work so hard, always taking care of everyone else. Don't you want someone to take care of you? I forced a smile, trying to hide my frustration. I can take care of myself just fine, Mom. Besides, I have you. That's sweet, dear, but I won't be around forever. Her words sent a chill down my spine. I just want to know you'll be settled before, well, you know. Mom, don't talk like that, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You're healthy as a horse. You'll outlive us all. She chuckled, but there was a sadness in her eyes that made my heart ache. Oh, Joanna, always the optimist. But life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? I couldn't argue with that. Life had certainly thrown us some curveballs over the years. Still, I wasn't about to let her dwell on morbid thoughts. Tell you what, I said, pulling out my phone. If it'll make you feel better, I'll sign up for one of those dating apps right now. Her face lit up like a Christmas tree. Oh, would you? That would be wonderful. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling at her enthusiasm. All right, but don't get your hopes up. These things are usually full of creeps and weirdos. As I started filling out my profile, Mom peered over my shoulder. Oh, put that you like cooking and gardening. Men love a woman who can keep a nice home. Mom, I groaned. It's not 1950. I'm not looking for a husband to cook and clean for. She waved her hand dismissively. Times may change, but a man's stomach is still the way to his heart. Trust me on this. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from work. Sorry, Mom, I've got to run. Emergency at the office. She frowned, concern etched on her face. On a Sunday? Joanna, you work too hard. This is exactly why you need someone in your life. I kissed her cheek, grabbing my purse. I promise I'll finish setting up that dating profile later. Love you, Mom. As I hurried out to my car, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling her words had stirred up. Was she right? Was I missing out on something by focusing so much on my career and taking care of her? I shook my head, pushing the thoughts aside as I started the engine. There was no time for self-doubt now. I had a crisis to manage at work. Little did I know, as I pulled out of Mom's driveway, that this conversation would be the catalyst for a series of events that would change my life forever. The simple act of creating that dating profile would set in motion a chain reaction of love, betrayal, and ultimately, redemption. But for now, all I could think about was getting to the office and putting out whatever fire had erupted on my day off. As I merged onto the highway, my phone buzzed again. Glancing at the screen, I saw a notification from the dating app. You have a new match! I couldn't help but laugh. Mom would be thrilled. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be such a bad idea after all. If only I had known then what I know now. But isn't that always the way? We make choices, thinking we're in control, never realizing how those small decisions can snowball into life-altering moments. As I pulled into the office parking lot, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever chaos awaited me inside. Little did I know, the real chaos was yet to come, and it would start with a simple swipe right on a dating app. I never expected a simple swipe right to change my life so dramatically. But there I was, 6 months after that fateful Sunday brunch with Mom, sitting across from Ethan in a cozy Italian restaurant, my heart fluttering like a teenager's. So tell me more about your work in healthcare, I said, twirling pasta around my fork. Ethan's eyes lit up. It's fascinating, really. We're developing new systems to streamline patient care. I'm actually up for a big promotion next month. I couldn't help but be impressed. Here was a man with ambition, drive, and a genuine passion for helping others. It was refreshing after the string of duds I'd encountered on the dating app. That's wonderful, I smiled. I'm sure you'll get it. He reached across the table, taking my hand. Thanks, Joanna. You know, I've never met anyone quite like you. Your dedication to your mother, your work ethic, it's inspiring. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Was this what Mom had been talking about? The feeling of being truly seen and appreciated? As we left the restaurant, Ethan surprised me with a gentle kiss. I'd like to see you again, he said softly. I'd like that too, I replied, my cheeks flushing. The next few months were a whirlwind. Ethan and I saw each other every chance we got. He was attentive, charming, and seemed to genuinely care about my life and my relationship with Mom. One evening, as we walked through the park near Mom's house, Ethan suddenly stopped and turned to face me. "Joanna," he said, his voice serious, "I know this might seem fast, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. "Will you marry me?" I gasped, tears springing to my eyes. "Ethan, Yes! Yes, of course!" As he slipped the ring on my finger, I couldn't help but think of Mom. She was going to be over the moon, and she was. When we told her the news, she practically danced around the kitchen. "Oh, Joanna, I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. Ethan, welcome to the family." Ethan hugged her warmly. "Thank you, Emily. I promise to take good care of your daughter." Mom's eyes misted over. "I know you will. You're a good man, Ethan." The wedding planning flew by in a blur of cake tastings, dress fittings, and venue tours. Before I knew it, I was standing at the altar saying, "I do," to the man of my dreams. As we danced at the reception, I caught sight of Mom watching us, a proud smile on her face. I felt a pang of sadness, knowing I'd be moving out of her house and starting my new life with Ethan. "Don't worry," Ethan whispered, as if reading my thoughts. "We'll visit your mom all the time. She's family now, too." I hugged him tighter, grateful for his understanding. The next morning, as we packed up my things from Mom's house, I couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease. Was I really ready for this big change? Mom must have sensed my hesitation. She pulled me aside while Ethan was loading the car. "Joanna, sweetie, are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Of course, Mom. Just a little overwhelmed, I guess." She cupped my face in her hands. "Marriage isn't always easy, honey. There will be ups and downs, but if you love each other and work at it, you'll be just fine." I nodded, trying to push down the doubt creeping into my mind. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? A loving husband, a new life, a chance at happiness. As we drove away from Mom's house, Ethan reached over and squeezed my hand. "Ready for our new adventure?" I smiled back at him, pushing my worries aside. Ready as I'll ever be. Little did I know, the real adventure and the real challenges were just beginning. As we pulled onto the highway towards our new home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving more than just my old life behind. I was stepping into an unknown future, one that would test me in ways I never imagined. The honeymoon phase of our marriage faded faster than I ever imagined. 6 months in, and I found myself staring at a sink full of dirty dishes, wondering where it all went wrong. "Ethan," I called out, my voice echoing through our spacious new home. "Could you give me a hand with these dishes?" His reply came from the living room, barely audible over the sound of the TV. "Sorry, honey. I've got a big presentation tomorrow. Can't you handle it?" I bit back a sigh, reminding myself of his recent promotion. He was under a lot of pressure, after all. "Sure," I replied, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. "No problem." As I scrubbed at a particularly stubborn pot, I couldn't help but think of Mom. She'd always said marriage was about teamwork, but lately it felt like I was playing for both sides. The next morning, I woke to find Ethan already gone. A hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter read, "Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight." I frowned, realizing this was the 3rd time this week he'd be working late. Pushing down my disappointment, I headed to work, determined to stay positive. At the office, my coworker Charlie greeted me with a warm smile. "Morning, Joanna. How's married life treating you?" I plastered on a smile. "Oh, you know, busy. Ethan's got a lot on his plate with the new position." Charlie's brow furrowed slightly. "And how about you? Are you doing okay?" His concern caught me off guard. When was the last time someone had asked me that? "I'm fine," I said, perhaps a bit too quickly, just adjusting to the new routine. As the day wore on, I found myself thinking about Charlie's question. Was I okay? The nagging doubt I'd felt on my wedding day seemed to be growing, despite my best efforts to ignore it. That evening, I decided to surprise Ethan at his office. Maybe a nice dinner out would help us reconnect. As I approached his building, I saw him exiting with a group of colleagues, laughing and relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. "Ethan," I called out, waving. His head snapped up, surprise and something else. Was it annoyance? Flashing across his face. "Joanna? What are you doing here?" I faltered, suddenly feeling foolish. "I thought maybe we could grab dinner." He glanced at his watch, then back at his colleagues. "Actually, we were just heading out to discuss the presentation. Rain check?" Before I could respond, he was gone, swallowed up by the crowd of suits and briefcases. I stood there, feeling invisible and small. At home, I called Mom, desperate for her reassuring voice. "Hi, sweetie," she answered on the first ring. "How are you?" The dam broke. Through tears, I poured out my frustrations, the loneliness, the uneven distribution of household chores, the growing distance between Ethan and me. Mom listened patiently, then said, "Oh, Joanna, marriage takes work, remember? Have you talked to Ethan about how you're feeling?" I wiped my eyes, feeling a mix of shame and resolve. No, not really. I didn't want to add to his stress. "Honey," Mom's voice was gentle but firm, "your feelings matter too. You need to communicate with each other." After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for Ethan. It was well past midnight when I heard his key in the lock. "Ethan," I started as he stumbled in, the smell of alcohol clinging to him. "We need to talk." He waved a dismissive hand. "Not now, Joanna. I'm beat." "No," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "Now. This can't wait." Ethan's eyes narrowed, a flash of something unfamiliar, almost cruel, crossing his face. "What's your problem? I'm working my ass off to provide for us, and this is the thanks I get?" His words hit me like a physical blow. As he stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind him, I sat frozen, the realization dawning on me like a cold, harsh light. This wasn't just a rough patch. This was the unraveling of everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about Ethan, about the life we were supposed to be building together. As the first rays of dawn crept through the window, I made a silent vow to myself. Things had to change. I just didn't know then how drastic that change would need to be. The shrill ring of my phone pierced the pre-dawn silence. My heart raced as I fumbled for it, instantly awake. Late-night calls never brought good news. "Joanna?" My neighbor's voice trembled. "It's your mother. The ambulance just left. You need to get to the hospital now." The world tilted on its axis. I leapt out of bed, my mind a whirlwind of panic and disbelief. "Ethan," I called out, but the other side of the bed was empty. Another late night at the office, no doubt. I drove to the hospital in a daze, praying to every deity I could think of. This couldn't be happening. Not Mom. Not now. The emergency room was a blur of harsh lights and antiseptic smells. A doctor approached, his face grave. "Mrs. Walker? I'm so sorry. We did everything we could, but your mother suffered a massive stroke. She didn't make it." The words hit me like a physical blow. I crumpled to the floor, sobs racking my body. Mom, my rock, my constant, was gone. Just like that. Hours passed in a haze of paperwork and phone calls. As morning light crept through the hospital windows, I realized Ethan still hadn't returned my frantic messages. With shaking hands, I dialed his number again. "What is it, Joanna?" His irritated voice cut through my grief. "I'm in the middle of something important." "Ethan," I choked out, "Mom's gone. She had a stroke. I need you." There was a long pause. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Listen, I've got this huge presentation today. I can't get away. You understand, right?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Ethan, my mother just died. I need my husband. And I need this promotion," he snapped. "We'll talk later." The line went dead. Numbness washed over me. In my darkest hour, when I needed him most, Ethan had abandoned me. The realization was like a knife to my heart. Charlie from work arrived at the hospital an hour later, concern etched on his face. "Joanna, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" His kindness broke through my shock. I collapsed into his arms, letting out the tears I'd been holding back. Charlie held me, murmuring words of comfort, being the support I so desperately needed. The next few days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and well-wishers. Ethan made a brief appearance at the wake, all polished smiles and hollow condolences, before rushing off again. I was too numb to even feel angry anymore. As I stood at Mom's graveside, watching her casket being lowered into the ground, a strange calm settled over me. I remembered her words from so long ago. "Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" "Oh, Mom, if only you knew." Back at home, I found Ethan packing a suitcase. "Business trip," he said curtly. "I'll be gone for a week." Something inside me snapped. "A week, Ethan, we need to talk about what happened. About us." He sighed, exasperated. "What's there to talk about? Your mother died. It's sad. Life goes on. I have responsibilities, Joanna. I can't put my career on hold for your grief." His callousness stunned me into silence. As he brushed past me, heading for the door, he paused. "Oh, here," he said, fishing in his pocket. He pressed something small and cold into my palm. Light a candle for your mom or something." I opened my hand to find a single nickel. The door slammed behind him before I could respond. Standing alone in our empty house, that pitiful nickel burning in my hand, I felt a shift deep within me. The fog of grief parted, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't a marriage. It was a sham, a prison of my own making. Mom would be heartbroken to see me like this, wasting away in a loveless union with a man who couldn't even pretend to care about my pain. As I clutched that insulting nickel, I made a vow to myself and to Mom's memory. This ends now. I don't know how, but I'm going to find a way out. I'm going to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my future. Little did I know, the path to that future would be paved with shocking revelations and a thirst for justice I never knew I possessed. The day of Mom's funeral dawned gray and somber, a perfect reflection of my shattered heart. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my black dress, feeling like a hollow shell of the woman I once was. Ethan's absence loomed large, a gaping wound in my already fragile psyche. As I entered the church, a sea of sympathetic faces turned towards me. I plastered on a brave smile, accepting hugs and condolences with robotic grace. Then I saw him. Roger, Ethan's brother, making his way through the crowd. "Joanna," he said softly, enveloping me in a warm embrace. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Emily was an incredible woman." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you, Roger. I'm glad you could make it." He squeezed my hand. "Of course, I wouldn't miss it. I just wish." He trailed off, a strange expression crossing his face. "What is it?" I asked, suddenly alert. Roger hesitated, then pulled me aside. "Joanna, there's something you should know. Ethan, he's not at work today." My brow furrowed. "What do you mean? He said he had an important presentation." "I ran into his boss at the coffee shop this morning," Roger explained, his voice low. "He mentioned that Ethan had taken bereavement leave for the week, said he was impressed by Ethan's dedication to family." The world tilted on its axis. That's not possible. Ethan told me he couldn't get away from work," he said. Roger's face was a mixture of anger and pity. "I'm sorry, Joanna. I thought you should know." As the funeral service began, my mind raced. Where was Ethan? Why had he lied? The questions swirled, threatening to drown out the pastor's words of comfort. After the service, as mourners filed past Mom's casket, I caught sight of a familiar face. Charlie, my coworker, stood at the back of the church, his eyes filled with concern. Our gazes locked, and in that moment, I felt a flicker of warmth in my cold, numb heart. Later at the wake, I found myself in Mom's kitchen, surrounded by well-meaning relatives and casseroles. The chatter faded to white noise as I struggled to process Roger's revelation. "Joanna?" Charlie's gentle voice cut through my thoughts. "Can I get you anything?" I looked up, meeting his kind eyes. "Actually, could you just sit with me for a moment?" He nodded, taking the seat beside me. We sat in companionable silence, a stark contrast to the constant tension I felt with Ethan. As the last of the mourners trickled out, I made a decision. I couldn't let this go. I needed answers. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed Ethan's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried his office next. "Hello, Joanna," his secretary answered. "I'm so sorry about your mother. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I replied, my voice tight. "Is Ethan there? I really need to speak with him." There was a pause. "Ethan? No, he's out on bereavement leave this week. Didn't he tell you?" The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. "Right, of course. Thank you." I ended the call, my mind reeling. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Charlie appeared at my side, concern etched on his face. "Joanna, what's wrong?" I looked up at him, feeling something shift inside me. The grief, the betrayal, the years of neglect, it all crystallized into a single, burning point of resolve. "Charlie," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I need your help. There's something I have to do." As I outlined my plan, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. This was it, the moment I'd start taking back control of my life. Whatever Ethan was hiding, wherever he was, I was going to find out. Mom's voice echoed in my head. "Life has a way of surprising us." "Well, Mom," I thought grimly, "it's time I did some surprising of my own." Little did I know, the surprises awaiting me would shake the very foundation of my world and set me on a path I never could have imagined. The next morning I woke with a steely determination. Roger had agreed to help me uncover the truth about Ethan, and we wasted no time. As a lawyer, Roger had connections that could prove invaluable. "I've got a friend in the HR department at Ethan's company," Roger said as we sat in his office. "She owes me a favor. Are you sure you want to do this, Joanna?" I nodded, my jaw set. "I need to know, Roger. All of it." Hours later, we sat surrounded by a mountain of documents. Financial reports, emails, meeting minutes, all painting a picture that made my stomach churn. "Joanna," Roger's voice was grave, "this goes beyond just lying about work. Look at these discrepancies in the financial reports. And these emails. Ethan's been manipulating data, covering up mistakes. This could be grounds for dismissal, maybe even legal action." My head spun. The Ethan I thought I knew was crumbling before my eyes, replaced by a stranger I didn't recognize. Just then my phone buzzed. A text from Charlie. "Found something. Meet me at the cafe across from Ethan's office, ASAP." "Go," Roger urged. "I'll keep digging here." 20 minutes later I rushed into the cafe, spotting Charlie in a corner booth. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "Charlie, what is it?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from him. He pushed a manila envelope towards me. "I followed Ethan, like you asked. Joanna, I'm so sorry, but—" With trembling hands I opened the envelope. Inside were photos, Ethan entering a hotel, arm in arm with a woman I didn't recognize. The timestamp showed it was taken yesterday, during Mom's funeral. The world tilted on its axis. I felt like I was going to be sick. "There's more," Charlie said softly. "I overheard them talking. Ethan's been embezzling money from the company. He's planning to leave the country, Joanna. Soon." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, was a lie. My phone rang, startling us both. It was Roger. "Joanna, you need to get back here now. I've found something big." The next few hours passed in a blur. Roger had uncovered a trail of fraudulent activities stretching back years. Ethan hadn't just been lying about work. He'd been systematically defrauding his company, manipulating data to cover his tracks. "We need to report this," Roger said, his face grim. "Joanna, I know he's my brother, but what he's done, it's criminal." I nodded, numb. "Do it." As Roger made the calls, I sat in stunned silence. How had I been so blind? So naive? The weight of my mother's absence hit me anew. She would have seen through Ethan's facade in an instant. Just then, my phone lit up with a text from Ethan. "Working late. Don't wait up." Something inside me snapped. No more lies. No more deception. I stood abruptly. "I'm going home," I announced. "I'm going to pack my things and leave. I can't be there when he comes back." Charlie and Roger exchanged worried glances. "You shouldn't be alone," Charlie said. "Let me come with you." As we drove to my house, no, Ethan's house, I felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. The life I thought I had was gone, shattered beyond repair. But in its place, I felt the stirrings of something new, something stronger. Walking into the house, I headed straight for the bedroom, Charlie close behind. As I pulled out a suitcase, my eyes fell on the framed photo of Ethan and me on our wedding day. With a sudden, fierce movement, I swept it off the dresser, watching it shatter on the floor. "Joanna?" Charlie said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. I turned to face him, tears streaming down my cheeks. "It's over, Charlie. All of it. I don't know what happens next, but I know I can't stay here another minute." As I zipped up my suitcase, I heard the front door open. Ethan's voice called out, "Joanna? Are you home?" My blood ran cold. This was it, the moment of truth, and I was ready for it. My heart pounded as Ethan's footsteps echoed through the house. Charlie squeezed my hand, a silent show of support. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. "Joanna?" Ethan called again, his voice closer now. "What's going on? Whose car is that outside?" I stepped out of the bedroom, Charlie closed behind me. Ethan's eyes widened as he took in the scene. My packed suitcase, Charlie's presents, the shattered wedding photo on the floor. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his face flushing with anger. "It's over, Ethan," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I know everything. The lies, the affair, the embezzlement, all of it." Ethan's face paled, then twisted into a sneer. "You don't know anything," he spat. "You're just a naive little girl playing detective." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone, showing him the photos Charlie had taken. "How about these, or the financial records Roger uncovered?" For a moment, Ethan looked genuinely shocked, then his expression hardened. "So what, you think you can just walk away, after everything I've done for you? Done for me? You've done nothing but lie and cheat. You couldn't even be there for me when my mother died. Ethan's eyes darted to Charlie, then back to me. And what's this? You're leaving me for him? He took a menacing step forward. Charlie moved to stand between us. Back off, Ethan. It's over. Ethan's fist connected with Charlie's jaw before I could react. Charlie stumbled back and I screamed as Ethan lunged for me. But Charlie was quicker. He tackled Ethan to the ground, pinning him down. Joanna, call the police, he shouted. With shaking hands, I dialed 911. As I reported the situation, I watched Ethan struggle against Charlie's hold, cursing and threatening us both. The next hour passed in a blur. The police arrived, taking statements and photographing Charlie's bruised face. Ethan was led away in handcuffs, still shouting threats and accusations. As the chaos subsided, I sank onto the couch, exhausted. Charlie sat beside me, holding an ice pack to his jaw. Are you okay? He asked softly. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I can't believe it's really over, I whispered. Just then my phone buzzed. It was Roger. Joanna, I've got more bad news. Ethan's company just called. They're pressing charges for the embezzlement. It's bad. Really bad. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. When I opened them again, I saw Charlie watching me with concern. What do you need? He asked simply. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. I need to leave, I said, standing up. Not just this house, but this whole life. I can't stay here, surrounded by all these memories and lies. Charlie nodded, understanding in his eyes. Where will you go? I thought of Mom, of all the dreams and plans we'd shared. There's a little town on the coast Mom always talked about retiring to. I think I'll start there. As I packed the last of my belongings, my eyes fell on the nickel Ethan had given me to light a candle for Mom. With a sudden, fierce movement, I snatched it up and shoved it in my pocket. Charlie helped me load my car, then hesitated. Joanna, I care about you. A lot, but I understand if you need space. I looked at him, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time. Come with me, I said impulsively. Just for a while. I could use a friend. As we drove away from the house that had once been my home, I felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. Everything I'd known was gone, shattered like that wedding photo on the bedroom floor. But as I glanced at Charlie, saw the open road ahead of us, I felt something else too. Hope. The nickel weighed heavy in my pocket, a reminder of all I'd lost, but also a promise of what was to come. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I was done being the naive, trusting Joanna. It was time to forge a new path on my own terms. As we crossed the city limits, I took a deep breath. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. 6 months after leaving Ethan, I stood on the beach of the small coastal town Mom had always dreamed of retiring to. The salty breeze whipped through my hair as I clutched the nickel that had become a symbol of my past. My phone buzzed, a text from Roger. It's over. Ethan took a plea deal. 10 years. You won't have to testify. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by a pang of sadness. Not for Ethan, but for the life I thought I'd have. I showed the message to Charlie, who stood beside me. How do you feel? He asked, his hand finding mine. Free, I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. Just then my phone rang. It was Ethan, calling from jail. My hand trembled as I answered. Joanna, his voice was desperate. Please, you have to help me. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding. I did it for us, for our future. I closed my eyes, remembering the lies, the betrayal, the years of manipulation. No, Ethan, I said firmly. You did it for yourself, always for yourself. Goodbye. I ended the call, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Charlie squeezed my hand, a silent show of support. Come on, he said softly. There's something I want to show you. We walked along the beach to a small animal shelter. Inside, a scruffy mutt with soulful eyes caught my attention. This is Chance, the shelter worker said. He's had a rough go of it, but he's got a lot of love to give. As I knelt to pet him, Chance licked my face, his tail wagging furiously. I felt something shift inside me, a spark of joy I hadn't felt since Mom died. I'll take him, I said, surprising myself. Later, as Charlie and I walked Chance along the shore, I spotted an old wishing well near the boardwalk. A memory flashed. Mom and me, years ago, tossing coins and making wishes. I pulled out the nickel, turning it over in my palm. You know, I said to Charlie, Mom always said that sometimes the best way to move forward is to let go of the past. With a deep breath, I tossed the nickel into the well. As it disappeared into the darkness, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. "So," Charlie said, a hint of nervousness in his voice, "what now?" I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the kindness and love that had been there all along. "Now," I said, "we build something new, together." As if on cue, Chance barked happily, chasing seagulls along the shore. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Over the next few months, life took on a new rhythm. I threw myself into volunteer work at the animal shelter, honoring Mom's memory by supporting the causes she loved. Charlie and I took things slow, building a relationship based on trust and mutual respect. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Charlie turned to me. "You know, Joanna, you're not the same woman I met all those months ago." I nodded, understanding what he meant. "I'm stronger now? Wiser? And happier?" he asked, a hint of hope in his voice. I smiled, leaning in to kiss him softly. "Happier than I've ever been." As night fell, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the loss. It had all shaped me, made me who I was now. But it didn't define me anymore. I was Joanna, daughter, friend, animal lover, and now a woman ready to love again. Mom would be proud, I thought. She always said life had a way of surprising us. Looking at Charlie, at Chance curled up at our feet, at the life we were building together, I realized Mom was right. Life does surprise us. But sometimes, if we're brave enough, we can surprise ourselves even more. As the stars came out, twinkling over the ocean, I made a silent vow. To live fully, to love deeply, and to always, always trust my own strength. The road ahead might be uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it would lead. After all, this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a whole new chapter. The shattered remains of my favorite mug lay scattered across the kitchen floor, a fitting metaphor for my life at that moment. I stood there, frozen, staring at the mess as my mind raced to process the information I'd just uncovered. "Clara? What was that noise?" Nate's voice called from the living room, snapping me out of my trance. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "Nothing," I managed to croak out. "Just dropped a mug." Footsteps approached, and Nate appeared in the doorway. His brow furrowed with concern as he took in the scene. "Are you okay? You look pale." I couldn't bring myself to look at him. Instead, I focused on the shards of ceramic at my feet. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice barely above a whisper. Nate stepped closer, reaching out to touch my arm. I flinched away instinctively, and confusion flashed across his face. "Clara, what's wrong?" The dam inside me broke. "How long?" I demanded, finally meeting his gaze. "How long what?" he asked, but I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes. I thrust my phone at him, the incriminating email still displayed on the screen. "How long have you been sleeping with her?" Nate's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, fumbling for words. Clara, I can explain." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "Explain how you've been cheating on me with some woman named Melissa, how you've been lying to me for God knows how long." "It's not what you think," Nate pleaded, reaching for me again. I stepped back, my heel crunching on a piece of broken mug. "Don't touch me," I hissed. "Just don't." The front door opened, and I heard Ava's cheerful voice. "Mom! Dad! I'm home!" Panic seized me. I couldn't let our daughter see us like this. "We'll discuss this later," I whispered fiercely to Nate. "Act normal." Nate nodded, his face a mask of guilt and fear. We both plastered on fake smiles as Ava bounded into the kitchen. "Hi, sweetie," I said, my voice unnaturally high. "How was school?" Ava's eyes widened as she noticed the broken mug. "What happened?" "Oh, just a little accident," I said, forcing a laugh. "Nothing to worry about. Why don't you go start your homework? I'll be there to help in a minute." As soon as Ava was out of earshot, I turned back to Nate. "We're not done," I warned him. "Not by a long shot." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced normalcy. I helped Ava with her homework, made dinner, and tucked her into bed, all while my insides churned with rage and betrayal. Finally, with Ava asleep, I confronted Nate in our bedroom. "Start talking," I demanded. Nate sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It was a mistake, Clara, a stupid, terrible mistake." "How long?" I repeated my earlier question. He hesitated. 6 months. The words hit me like a physical blow. 6 months. Half a year of lies and deceit. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I don't know," Nate said, his eyes pleading. "Things between us have been different lately. I felt disconnected, and Melissa was just There. I laughed humorlessly. Oh, so it's my fault because I've been busy with work and taking care of our daughter? No, that's not what I meant, Nate backpedaled. I'm not blaming you. It was all me. I made a terrible choice and I'm so sorry. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. Sorry isn't good enough, Nate. You've broken us. How am I supposed to trust you ever again? As I stood there, staring at the man I thought I knew, I realized our life together would never be the same. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I stared at Nate across the kitchen table, my fingers wrapped tightly around my coffee mug. The silence between us was thick with unspoken words and lingering resentment. I've been thinking, Nate said, breaking the tension. Maybe we need a change of scenery. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? He took a deep breath. I think we should move in with my parents for a while. The suggestion hit me like a bucket of ice water. Your parents? Nate, are you serious? Just hear me out, he pleaded. It could be good for us. A fresh start, away from everything. I laughed bitterly. You mean away from your mistakes? Nate flinched but pressed on. Mom and Dad have that big house. We'd have our own space and they could help with Ava. It would give us time to focus on us, on rebuilding our marriage. The word marriage made my stomach churn. Was there even anything left to rebuild? Clara, Nate said softly, reaching for my hand. This time I didn't pull away. I know I messed up, but I want to make this work. For us, for Ava, please just consider it. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of our vows pressing down on me. For better or for worse, right? Fine, I said finally. I'll think about it. The next few days were a whirlwind of discussions and preparations. Despite my reservations, I found myself agreeing to Nate's plan. Maybe a change would do us good. Maybe his parents' presence would keep him on the straight and narrow. The day of the move arrived all too quickly. As we pulled up to Evelyn and Alfred's sprawling suburban home, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. Evelyn burst out of the front door, arms wide open. Oh, my darlings, she cried, enveloping Nate in a hug before turning to Ava. And there's my precious granddaughter. I hung back, watching the scene unfold. Alfred appeared in the doorway, nodding a greeting. Clara, he said, his tone cordial but cool. Alfred, I replied, forcing a smile. As we settled into our new living arrangement, I tried to remain optimistic. Evelyn and Alfred were polite, if a bit distant. Nate seemed more relaxed, more attentive. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this could work. But as the days turned into weeks, cracks began to appear in the facade. It started small. Evelyn forgetting to include me in meal planning, Alfred making offhand comments about my work hours, the way they'd fall silent when I entered a room, exchanging meaningful glances. One evening, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. I just don't understand what he sees in her. Evelyn's voice drifted from the kitchen. Nate could do so much better. Now, Alfred replied. She's the mother of our grandchild. We have to tolerate her for Ava's sake. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. Tolerate me? Is that what they thought? Clara? Nate's voice startled me. What are you doing? I turned to face him, anger and hurt warring inside me. Your parents, I hissed. They hate me. Nate's brow furrowed. What? No, they don't. You're imagining things. Imagining things? I repeated incredulously. I just heard them talking about me. They said they have to tolerate me. I'm sure you misunderstood, Nate said, his tone placating. Mom and Dad love you. I stared at him, disbelief turning to fury. Are you seriously taking their side? I'm not taking sides, Nate protested. I just think you're overreacting. The word overreacting was the final straw. You know what? I snapped. I'm done. This was a mistake. All of it. I stormed past him, heading for our room. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I could hear Nate following me, pleading. Clara, please, don't do this. We can work it out. I whirled to face him, tears stinging my eyes. Work what out, Nate? Your affair, your parents' disdain, your inability to stand up for me? Tell me, what exactly are we working out? As I stood there, suitcase in hand, I realized I was at a crossroads. Stay and fight for a marriage that felt more like a prison, or leave and face an uncertain future. The choice I made would change everything. I woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of hushed voices downstairs. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then reality crashed back in. I was in Nate's childhood bedroom, surrounded by his old trophies and faded posters, trying to salvage a marriage that felt like it was held together by fraying threads. Sighing, I dragged myself out of bed and made my way downstairs. The voices grew clearer as I approached the kitchen. "Just don't think she's trying hard enough," Evelyn was saying. "Nate deserves better." I froze, my hand on the doorknob. Nate's response was too low for me to hear, but Evelyn's dismissive snort came through loud and clear. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The conversation stopped abruptly, 3 pairs of eyes turning to me. "Good morning," I said, forcing a smile. "Clara, dear," Evelyn chirped, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We were just talking about you." "I heard," I replied coolly, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Nate cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mom was just saying how she thinks we should all go out for dinner tonight, as a family." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what brought this on?" Alfred spoke up, his tone gruff. "We thought it might be good for you all to get out of the house. You've been cooped up here for weeks." I bit back a retort about whose idea it was for us to move in the first place. Instead, I nodded. "Sure, dinner sounds nice." The rest of the day passed in a blur of tension and forced politeness. By the time we arrived at the restaurant, my nerves were frayed to the breaking point. As we settled into our seats, Evelyn leaned across the table. "Clara, dear, I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of ordering for you. I know how indecisive you can be." I blinked, taken aback. "Actually, Evelyn, Oh, it's no trouble at all," she interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "I'm sure you'll love it." I looked to Nate for support, but he was engrossed in the wine list. Ava, sensing the tension, squirmed uncomfortably in her seat. The meal progressed, each moment more excruciating than the last. Evelyn dominated the conversation, barely allowing me to get a word in edgewise. Alfred made thinly veiled comments about my parenting skills, while Nate sat in silence, avoiding eye contact. Finally, as dessert arrived, I'd had enough. "Excuse me," I said, standing abruptly. "I need some air." I rushed out of the restaurant, gulping in the cool night air. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Clara?" Nate's voice came from behind me. "Are you okay?" I whirled to face him. "Am I okay? Are you seriously asking me that?" He looked bewildered. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" I repeated incredulously. "Your parents have been insulting me all night, and you've just sat there and let it happen." Nate's face hardened. "They're trying their best, Clara. You're not exactly making it easy." I stared at him, disbelief turning to anger. "So this is my fault now?" "I didn't say that," he backpedaled, "but you could try harder to get along with them." "Try harder?" I hissed. "I've been trying so hard I'm about to break, Nate, and you don't even see it." His expression softened. "Clara, please, let's not do this here." But I was beyond caring about making a scene. "No, Nate, we're doing this now. I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's so clearly not." "What are you saying?" he asked, a note of fear creeping into his voice. I took a deep breath, the words I'd been holding back for weeks finally spilling out. "I'm saying that this isn't working. Moving in with your parents, trying to fix our marriage, it's all been a huge mistake." Nate's face crumpled. "You don't mean that." "I do," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. I think it's time we face the truth. Our marriage is over, Nate." As the words hung in the air between us, I realized there was no going back. The life I'd known, the future I'd planned, was crumbling around me. But amid the fear and uncertainty, I felt something else stirring, a spark of hope, a glimmer of freedom. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't live like this anymore. The days following our disastrous dinner outing blurred together in a haze of tension and unspoken words. Nate and I barely spoke, tiptoeing around each other like strangers. Evelyn and Alfred's hostility, once veiled, now simmered just beneath the surface. One morning I woke to find Ava's bed empty. Panic gripped me as I rushed downstairs, only to find her giggling in the kitchen with Evelyn. "There you are, sleepyhead," Evelyn cooed, her saccharine tones setting my teeth on edge. "I was just teaching Ava how to make proper pancakes. Lord knows she needs someone to show her these things." I bit back a retort, forcing a smile for Ava's sake. "That's nice, sweetie. Why don't you go get dressed for school?" As Ava scampered off, Evelyn's demeanor changed instantly. "You know, Clara," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "it wouldn't kill you to take more interest in domestic matters. A woman should know how to keep a proper home." I felt my temper flare. I manage just fine, Evelyn. My career doesn't make me any less of a mother or wife. She scoffed. Does it? Because from where I'm standing, your family is falling apart. Her words hit like a physical blow. Before I could respond, Nate walked in. Everything okay? He asked, glancing between us. Just fine, dear, Evelyn chirped, all sweetness again. Clara and I were just having a little chat about family values. Nate nodded, avoiding my gaze. Right. Well, I'm heading to work. Clara, don't forget we have that dinner with my boss tonight. I froze. That's tonight? Nate, I can't. I have a deadline. You can't cancel, he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. This is important for my career. As he left, Evelyn's smug smile made my blood boil. See? A good wife would remember these things. That evening, I found myself at an upscale restaurant, seated across from Nate's boss and his wife. The conversation flowed around me as I struggled to focus, my mind still on my unfinished article. So, Clara, Nate's boss turned to me. Nate tells me you're a journalist, too. How's that going with family life? Before I could answer, Nate jumped in. Oh, Clara's thinking of scaling back her work, aren't you, honey? To focus more on home life. I stared at him, dumbfounded. What? Nate's boss nodded approvingly. Good for you. Family should always come first. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. As soon as we got home, I rounded on Nate. What the hell was that about? Scaling back my work? He sighed, loosening his tie. Come on, Clara. You know how important this promotion is. I was just saying what he wanted to hear. At my expense? I hissed, mindful of Ava sleeping upstairs. Don't be so dramatic, he scoffed. It's not like your job is as demanding as mine anyway. I reeled back as if slapped. Is that what you really think? Before he could answer, Alfred appeared in the doorway. Everything all right? We could hear you from upstairs. Nate plastered on a smile. Just a little disagreement, Dad. Nothing to worry about. Alfred's gaze settled on me, cold and judgmental. Clara, I think it's time you started considering what's best for this family. Your selfish behavior is tearing it apart. Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and resentment came pouring out. Selfish? I've given everything to this family. I've put up with your constant criticism, your son's infidelity, all while trying to maintain my career and raise my daughter. And I'm the selfish one? The room fell silent. Nate and Alfred stared at me, shocked. In that moment, I realized I'd reached a crossroads. I could no longer pretend everything was fine. I couldn't keep sacrificing my self-respect, my career, my happiness for a family that didn't value me. I'm done, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I can't do this anymore. As I turned to leave the room, I caught sight of Ava standing on the stairs, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. My heart broke, but I knew in that moment that I had to be strong, for both of us. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. Things couldn't go on as they were. It was time for a change, no matter how terrifying that prospect might be. The morning after my outburst, I woke with a sense of dread weighing heavily on my chest. The house was eerily quiet as I made my way downstairs, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. I found Nate in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair disheveled. We need to talk, he said, his voice hoarse. I nodded, pouring myself a cup. Yes, we do. I've been thinking about what you said last night, Nate began. I know things haven't been easy. Easy? I interrupted, a bitter laugh escaping me. Nate, things haven't been easy since the day I found out about your affair. Living here, with your parents constantly undermining me, has been a nightmare. Nate's face hardened. They're just trying to help, Clara. Maybe if you made more of an effort. Don't you dare put this on me, I hissed, my anger flaring. I've been trying so hard I'm exhausted, but it's never enough, is it? Not for you, not for them. Before Nate could respond, Evelyn swept into the kitchen. Oh good, you're both up. Nate, dear, don't forget you promised to take your father golfing today. I stared at Nate incredulously. Golfing? Now? He at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. I forgot. Dad's been looking forward to it. Of course he has, I muttered, shaking my head in disbelief. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Is there a problem, Clara? Surely you can handle things here for one day without my son. Something inside me snapped. You know what, Evelyn? There is a problem. The problem is that your son and I are trying to have an important conversation about our marriage, and you're more concerned about a golf game. Evelyn's face flushed with anger. How dare you speak to me like that in my own home? Nate, are you going to let her talk to me this way? I turned to Nate, waiting to see what he would do. His eyes darted between us, panic evident on his face. Mom, Clara, please, can't we all just calm down? His weak attempt at peacemaking was the final straw. No, Nate, we can't just calm down. This is our life, our marriage falling apart, and you're worried about keeping the peace? I stormed out of the kitchen, my mind racing. As I reached the stairs, I heard Ava's small voice. Mommy? Why is everyone yelling? My heart clenched. I knelt down, pulling her into a hug. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Mommy and Daddy are just having a disagreement. Are we going to have to leave? She asked, her voice trembling. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I pulled back, looking into her worried eyes. In that moment, I knew I had to make a decision, not just for myself, but for Ava. I don't know, honey, I said honestly, but I promise, whatever happens, we'll be okay. As I held my daughter, I heard Nate and Evelyn's voices rising again downstairs. The constant tension, the arguments, the silent treatment, it was all taking a toll on Ava. I couldn't let this continue. With a deep breath, I made my decision. I gently pulled away from Ava. Sweetie, can you go to your room and pack a small bag? Just some clothes and your favorite toys. Her eyes widened. Are we going on a trip? I forced a smile. Something like that. Go on now, I'll be right there. As Ava scampered off, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I should have called weeks ago. Joan? It's Clara. I need your help. Can Ava and I stay with you for a while? My sister's voice was warm and concerned. Of course. What's going on? I took a shaky breath. I'm leaving Nate. I can't do this anymore. As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of terror and relief wash over me. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. Joan's apartment felt like a sanctuary after the suffocating atmosphere at Nate's parents' house. As I sank into her plush couch, the weight of the past few months seemed to lift slightly from my shoulders. Okay, sis, Joan said, handing me a steaming mug of tea. Start from the beginning. I poured out everything. Nate's affair, the move to his parents' house, the constant belittling and criticism. Joan listened intently, her lawyer's mind no doubt cataloging every detail. Clara, she said when I finished, her voice gentle but firm. This is emotional abuse. What they've been doing to you, it's not okay. Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. Abuse. I'd been so caught up in trying to make things work, I hadn't even realized. We need to document everything, Joan continued, switching into lawyer mode. Every insult, every manipulative comment, it'll be crucial if Nate tries to fight for custody of Ava. The mention of custody sent a chill down my spine. You really think he'd do that? Joan's expression hardened. After what you've told me about his parents, we need to be prepared for anything. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into gathering evidence. I wrote down every memory of Evelyn and Alfred's mistreatment, every instance of Nate's neglect. Joan helped me organize it all, building a case that left me stunned when I saw it laid out. But even as I worked, a nagging doubt gnawed at me. Was I really ready to end my marriage, to tear apart Ava's family? My phone buzzed with a text from Nate. We need to talk. Come to the house tomorrow. I showed Joan the message, my stomach churning. I have to go, don't I? She nodded grimly. Yes, but not alone. I'm coming with you. The next day, we pulled up to Nate's parents' house. My palms were sweaty as I rang the doorbell. Nate answered, his eyes widening at the sight of Joan. What's she doing here? He demanded. Moral support, I said firmly, pushing past him into the house. Evelyn and Alfred were waiting in the living room, their faces masks of disapproval. Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter-in-law, Evelyn sneered. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I'm here to talk about divorce proceedings, Nate, and custody arrangements for Ava. The room erupted into chaos. Nate started pleading, Evelyn shrieked about the sanctity of marriage, and Alfred thundered about ungrateful wives. Through it all, Joan stood beside me, a pillar of strength. Enough! I shouted, silencing the room. I've made my decision. I won't live like this anymore, and I won't let Ava grow up in this toxic environment. Nate's face contorted with anger. You can't take my daughter away from me. Watch me, I retorted, my voice ice cold. I have documented evidence of the emotional abuse I've endured in this house. Do you really want to take this to court? The color drained from Nate's face. Evelyn, however, wasn't backing down. "You ungrateful little." She lunged forward, her hand raised as if to slap me. Joan stepped between us, her voice sharp as a knife. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Mrs. Thompson. Assault charges wouldn't look good in a custody battle." Evelyn recoiled, sputtering with rage. I turned to Nate, my heart pounding. "This is your last chance, Nate. Are you going to stand with your wife and daughter, or with them?" The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. I could see the conflict in Nate's eyes, the war between the man I'd married and the son his parents had molded. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't leave my parents, Clara. They need me." In that moment I felt something inside me shatter. The last lingering hope that we could salvage our marriage crumbled to dust, but along with the pain came a surge of determination. "Then we're done," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Expect to hear from my lawyer." As Joan and I walked out of the house, I felt like I was leaving more than just a failed marriage behind. I was leaving behind years of self-doubt, of compromise, of settling for less than I deserved. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I had the strength to face them. And more importantly, I had the strength to show Ava what it meant to stand up for oneself, to demand respect and love. As we drove away, I allowed myself a small smile. This wasn't an ending. It was a new beginning. The day of the final confrontation arrived with a sense of foreboding. Joan and I had spent weeks preparing, but as we approached Nate's lawyer's office, my stomach churned with anxiety. "Remember," Joan whispered as we entered the building, "you hold all the cards, stay strong." Nate was already there, looking haggard and defeated. His eyes met mine briefly before darting away. His lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit, eyed us coolly. "Let's get started, shall we?" she said, gesturing to the conference room. As we settled into our seats, I couldn't help but think of Ava, waiting at Joan's apartment with a babysitter. Everything I was about to do was for her. Nate's lawyer spoke first. "My client is willing to agree to joint custody with Ava primarily residing with him and his parents." I felt a surge of anger. "Absolutely not," I snapped. "I have evidence of the emotional abuse I suffered in that house. Ava will not be subjected to that environment." The lawyer's eyes narrowed. "Allegations of abuse are serious, Mrs. Thompson. Do you have proof?" Joan slid a thick folder across the table. "We have documented every instance of mistreatment, corroborated by witnesses and psychological evaluations." As Nate and his lawyer pored over the documents, I saw the color drain from his face. "Clara," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I had no idea it was this bad." I laughed bitterly. "Of course you didn't. You were too busy trying to please your parents to notice what they were doing to your wife and daughter." Nate's lawyer cleared her throat. "In light of this evidence, we're prepared to discuss a more equitable arrangement." The next few hours were a blur of negotiations. Custody arrangements, division of assets, alimony. Every detail of our lives together was dissected and divided. Through it all, I held firm, buoyed by Joan's steady presence and the memory of everything I'd endured. Finally, we reached an agreement. Primary custody of Ava would be mine, with Nate granted visitation rights. Our assets would be split fairly, and I would retain our family home. As Nate picked up the pen to sign the divorce papers, he hesitated. "Clara," he said, his voice breaking, "I'm sorry. For everything. I should have protected you and Ava." For a moment I felt a flicker of the love we once shared, but then I remembered the years of neglect, of choosing his parents over his family, and my resolve hardened. "It's too late for sorry, Nate," I said quietly. "Just sign the papers." With a shaky hand, Nate signed. As I added my own signature, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was done. I was free. As we left the office, Joan squeezed my hand. "You did it, sis. I'm so proud of you." But our victory was short-lived. As we stepped out of the building, we were confronted by a furious Evelyn and Alfred. "You conniving witch!" Evelyn shrieked. "How dare you turn our son against us?" Alfred loomed over me, his face red with rage. "You'll regret this, Clara. We'll make sure you never see Ava again." I felt a moment of panic, but then something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up anger and frustration came pouring out. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice ringing through the street. "You will not threaten me or my daughter ever again. Your reign of manipulation and abuse ends now. I turned to Nate, who had followed us out. This is your last chance, Nate. Your parents or your daughter, choose. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. I could see the conflict in Nate's eyes, the war between the man I'd married and the son his parents had molded. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I choose Ava. Evelyn let out a wail of despair, while Alfred's face contorted with fury, but I barely noticed them. In that moment, looking at Nate's defeated form, I realized something profound. I didn't need his choice. I didn't need his approval or his parents' acceptance. I had everything I needed, my daughter, my freedom, and my self-respect. As Joan and I walked away, leaving the chaos behind, I felt a surge of triumph. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, I was ready to face it head-on. The old Clara, the one who had bent and compromised and suffered in silence, was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who would fight for herself and her daughter with every breath. This wasn't just an ending, it was a new beginning, full of possibility and hope, and I was ready for it. 5 years had passed since that fateful day when I walked away from Nate and his toxic family. Life hadn't been easy, but it had been mine, filled with hard-won victories, cherished moments with Ava, and a sense of peace I'd never known before. I was in the middle of preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. Ava, now a spirited 13-year-old, called out, "I'll get it, Mom." A moment later, I heard her startled voice. "Dad?" My blood ran cold. I rushed to the door, wiping my hands on my apron. There stood Nate, a shadow of his former self. His clothes were disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, and he reeked of alcohol. "Clara," he slurred, swaying slightly, "I need your help." I instinctively stepped in front of Ava, shielding her. "Nate, what are you doing here?" He stumbled forward, and I held up a hand to stop him. "Please," he begged. "I've lost everything. My job, my savings. Even Mom and Dad have cut me off. I didn't know where else to go." A part of me, the part that had once loved this man, ached to help him. But I remembered the years of neglect, the pain he'd put me through, and I steeled myself. "Ava, honey," I said calmly, "go to your room, please." Once Ava was out of earshot, I turned back to Nate. "You can't be here," I said firmly. "You're drunk and you're scaring our daughter." "Our daughter," he repeated bitterly, "the one you took from me." Anger flared within me. "I didn't take her from you, Nate. You chose to let her go when you refused to stand up to your parents." He lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my arm. "You ruined my life," he shouted. For a moment, fear gripped me, but then something shifted. I was no longer the woman who would cower or make excuses for him. I was stronger now. With a swift motion, I broke free of his grip and pushed him back. "No, Nate," I said, my voice steady and strong. "You ruined your own life, and I won't let you ruin mine or Ava's any longer." I saw a flicker of the old Nate in his eyes, shame, regret, and a hint of admiration. But it was too late for that now. "I'm calling you a cab," I said. "And then I'm calling my lawyer. This ends now, Nate. No more surprise visits, no more manipulations. If you want to see Ava, you'll do it through proper channels, and you'll do it sober." As I dialed the cab company, I felt a presence behind me. Ava stood there, her eyes wide but determined. "Is Dad okay?" she asked softly. I knelt down to her level, my heart swelling with love and pride for this brave, compassionate girl. "He's going through a tough time, sweetie, but that's not our responsibility anymore. We're going to be okay." As we watched the cab drive away with Nate, I felt a profound sense of closure. The last lingering threads of my old life had been severed, and the future stretched out before us, bright and full of possibility. Later that night, as Ava slept peacefully, I sat on our porch, sipping tea and reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the struggles, the moments of doubt, they had all shaped me into the woman I was now. I thought of the women out there who might be where I was 5 years ago, trapped, afraid, doubting themselves. I wished I could tell them that there was hope, that they were stronger than they knew. As the stars twinkled above, I made a silent vow. I would use my voice, my experiences, to help others find their strength. My story wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving, about reclaiming one's power and dignity. Tomorrow, I decided I would start writing again. Not just articles, but a book. My story, raw and honest, a beacon of hope for others. The cool night breeze caressed my face, and I smiled. Life wasn't perfect, but it was beautifully, wonderfully mine. And for the first time in years, I was excited about what the future held. As I headed back inside, I paused at Ava's room, watching her sleep. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt had been worth it. For her, for me, for the life we'd built together. This wasn't just an ending. It was a new chapter, brimming with hope, strength, and the unshakable knowledge that we were going to be more than okay. We were going to be extraordinary. The sound of shattering glass pierced the air, jolting me from my thoughts. I stared at the remnants of my favorite vase scattered across the hardwood floor, a casualty of my trembling hands. Funny how a simple text message could upend my entire world. "Mom? What was that noise?" Ava's concerned voice called from upstairs. I cleared my throat, willing my voice to remain steady. "Nothing, sweetie, just knocked something over. Go back to sleep." As I knelt to clean up the mess, my phone screen lit up again. Adam's message glared at me. "Working late. Don't wait up." Working late. Right, the same excuse he'd been using for months now. I'd ignored the signs, convinced myself I was being paranoid. But tonight, everything changed. Earlier that evening, I'd received an anonymous email. A single photo attached. Adam, my husband of 20 years, locked in an embrace with a woman I didn't recognize. Young, blonde, beautiful. Everything I used to be. The doorbell rang, startling me. I glanced at the clock. 11:30 p.m. Who could it be at this hour? I opened the door to find my mother Ellen standing there. One look at her face told me she knew. "Oh, Laura," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. "I came as soon as I got your message." I hadn't realized I'd texted her. The past few hours were a blur. "Come in, Mom," I whispered, ushering her inside. "The kids are asleep." We settled in the kitchen, where Ellen immediately started brewing tea. Some things never change. My mother's belief that a cup of tea could solve any problem. "Have you confronted him?" Ellen asked, placing a steaming mug in front of me. I shook my head. "I don't even know where to start." "How do you ask your husband if he's having an affair?" Ellen's eyes hardened. "You don't ask, Laura. You tell him you know." "But what if I'm wrong? What if there's an explanation? Is there ever a good explanation for a married man embracing another woman like that?" I sighed, running my fingers through my hair. I can't believe this is happening. We were happy once, weren't we?" Ellen reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You were. But people change, Laura. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before I could answer, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway made us both freeze. Adam was home. "I should go," Ellen said, standing up. I grabbed her arm. "No, please stay. I don't think I can face him alone." The front door opened, and Adam's footsteps echoed through the house. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, surprise flickering across his face at the sight of Ellen. "Ellen? What are you doing here so late?" My mother's voice was ice. "Supporting my daughter, something you seem incapable of doing lately." Adam's eyes darted between us, confusion turning to wariness. "Laura, what's going on?" I stood up slowly, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment that would change everything. "We need to talk, Adam," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "About your late nights at work. About the lipstick stains I found on your shirt last week. About this." I held up my phone, the damning photo on display. Adam's face drained of color. "Laura, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. "Can you explain why you're embracing another woman? Why you've been lying to me for months?" Adam took a step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "It's not what you think. Don't." I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me, Adam. Not anymore." As I stared at the stranger my husband had become, I realized this was just the beginning. The life I thought I knew was crumbling around me, and I had no idea what would be left standing when the dust settled. I couldn't sleep that night, memories of the past flooding my mind. How did we get here? The contrast between then and now was stark, almost painful. 20 years ago, Adam and I were inseparable. I still remember our first date like it was yesterday. He showed up at my door with a bouquet of wildflowers, his nervous smile melting my heart. "I picked these myself," he'd said, a blush creeping up his neck. "I hope you're not allergic." I wasn't, thankfully. That night, we talked for hours at a little Italian restaurant downtown. I felt like I'd known him my whole life. Our whirlwind romance swept us off our feet. Within 6 months we were engaged. My mother, ever the voice of reason, had cautioned us to slow down. "Laura, honey," she'd said, concern etched on her face, "are you sure about this? You've only known Adam for a short time." But I was sure, or at least I thought I was. The wedding was small but perfect. Adam's vows still echoed in my ears. "Laura, I promise to love you, cherish you, and be faithful to you for all the days of my life." Faithful. The word now felt like a mockery. Our early years were blissful. When Ava was born, Adam was the doting father I'd always dreamed of. He'd spend hours rocking her to sleep, singing off-key lullabies that made me laugh. Then came Michael, and our family felt complete. I threw myself into motherhood, while Adam focused on his career. It seemed like the perfect arrangement at the time. But somewhere along the way, things changed. The loving glances became fleeting, the conversations shorter. Adam started working later, coming home exhausted and irritable. A knock on my bedroom door jolted me from my reverie. "Mom?" It was Ava. "Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetie," I said, sitting up in bed. Ava entered, her eyes red-rimmed. She'd been crying. "I heard you and Dad fighting earlier. What's going on?" I patted the bed beside me, and she sat down, curling into my side like she used to as a child. "Your father, he's been unfaithful, Ava." She stiffened. "What? Are you sure?" I nodded, feeling tears prick my eyes. "I have proof. A photo of him with another woman." "That bastard," Ava hissed, her sadness quickly turning to anger. "How could he do this to you, to us?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I wish I did." We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in our thoughts. Then Ava spoke up, her voice small. "What are you going to do?" It was the question I'd been avoiding all night. What was I going to do? The life I'd built, the future I'd planned, it was all crumbling around me. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I won't let him hurt us anymore." Ava nodded, squeezing my hand. "We're here for you, Mom. Me and Michael both." As if on cue, there was another knock. Michael poked his head in, his face a mask of concern. "Family meeting?" I managed a weak smile. "Seems like it. Come join us." Michael settled on my other side, and for a moment I was transported back in time. How many nights had we spent like this, cuddled together, reading bedtime stories? "Dad really messed up, huh?" Michael said, breaking the silence. I sighed. "He did, but we're going to get through this, together." As I held my children close, a new resolve settled over me. I may have lost my husband, but I still had my family, and I would fight tooth and nail to protect them. The sound of the front door opening downstairs made us all tense. Adam was home. "I should go talk to him," I said, disentangling myself from Ava and Michael. "We'll come with you," Ava insisted, her jaw set in determination. I shook my head. "No, this is something I need to do alone, but knowing you're here, it means everything." As I descended the stairs, my heart pounding, I realized this was it, the moment that would define our future. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. The morning light filtered through the kitchen curtains, casting a deceptively cheerful glow on the wreckage of my life. I stood at the sink, mechanically washing dishes from a breakfast no one had eaten. The house was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the explosive confrontation from the night before. Adam had stormed out after our fight, leaving me with more questions than answers. The kids had retreated to their rooms, the weight of our family's implosion heavy on their shoulders. The sound of the front door opening made me tense. Adam's footsteps echoed through the house, growing louder as he approached the kitchen. "Laura," he said, his voice rough, "we need to talk." I turned slowly, steeling myself. "About what, Adam? Your lies? Your betrayal?" He winced, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I know I messed up, but you have to understand, things haven't been right between us for a long time. And that justifies cheating?" I spat, anger rising in my chest. "No, of course not. But what?" I interrupted, slamming a plate down on the counter. "You were lonely? Bored? Tell me, Adam, what excuse could possibly make this okay?" He stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "I never meant to hurt you, Laura. It just happened." I laughed bitterly. "Things don't just happen, Adam. You made choices. Choices that destroyed our family." "Our family was already broken," he shouted, his composure cracking. "You were so wrapped up in being the perfect wife and mother, you forgot about me." His words hit me like a physical blow. "How dare you?" I whispered, my voice trembling with rage. "I gave up everything for this family, my career, my dreams, and you have the audacity to say I forgot about you?" Adam's face softened, regret flickering in his eyes. Laura, I didn't mean. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. What? I said, get out, I screamed, grabbing the nearest object, a coffee mug, and hurling it at the wall beside him. It shattered, the sound echoing through the kitchen. Adam stumbled back, shock written across his face. Laura, please. No, I cut him off. I'm done listening to your excuses. I want you out of this house. Now. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made us both turn. Ava and Michael stood in the doorway, their faces a mix of concern and anger. What's going on? Michael asked, his eyes darting between us. Your father was just leaving, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Adam looked at our children, desperation in his eyes. Ava, Michael, please. You have to understand. Understand what, Dad? Ava interrupted, her voice cold. That you cheated on Mom? That you broke apart our family? It's not that simple, Adam protested weakly. Michael stepped forward, his jaw clenched. It is that simple. You betrayed us, Dad. All of us. The weight of their words seemed to crush Adam. He slumped, defeated. I'll go pack a bag, he mumbled, shuffling out of the kitchen. As soon as he was gone, my knees buckled. Ava and Michael were at my side in an instant, guiding me to a chair. It's okay, Mom, Ava soothed, rubbing my back. We're here. Michael nodded, his face set in determination. We'll get through this together. I looked at my children, overwhelmed by their strength and support. Despite the pain and anger, a small spark of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild from this. The sound of Adam's footsteps on the stairs made us all tense. He appeared in the doorway, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I'll be staying at a hotel, he said, his voice hollow. I'm sorry, for everything. As he turned to leave, a thought struck me. Adam, I called out, my voice surprisingly steady. Who is she? He froze, his back to us. What? The woman in the photo. Who is she? Adam's shoulders slumped. He turned slowly, his face a mask of guilt and shame. Her name is Gwendolyn, he said softly. She's my coworker. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Not only had he cheated, but he'd brought his affair into our everyday lives. How many times had I heard that name in passing? How many company parties had I attended, unknowingly, standing in the same room as the woman who was destroying my marriage? As Adam walked out the door, I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there, raw and aching, but alongside it was a new emotion. Determination. I would not let this break me. I would not let Adam's betrayal define the rest of my life. I looked at Ava and Michael, drawing strength from their presence. We're going to be okay, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. It won't be easy, but we'll get through this. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I actually believed it. The days following Adam's departure blurred together in a haze of grief and anger. I found myself going through the motions, barely registering the concerned looks from Ava and Michael. But as the initial shock began to wear off, a new emotion took hold, determination. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the business card in my hand. Hawkeye Investigations, it read in bold letters. My mother's words echoed in my mind. Sometimes, Laura, you need to fight fire with fire. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number. Hawkeye Investigations, how can we help you? A gruff voice answered. I took a deep breath. I need to hire a private investigator. An hour later, I sat across from Jack Hawkins, a weathered man with kind eyes that had seen too much. As I poured out my story, he listened intently, jotting down notes. Mrs. Thompson, he said when I finished, I'll be straight with you. What I find might not be easy to hear. Are you sure you want to do this? I nodded, my resolve strengthening. I need to know the truth, Mr. Hawkins. All of it. As Jack left, promising updates soon, Ava walked in. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of his business card on the table. Mom, what are you doing? She asked, her voice laced with concern. I sighed, bracing myself for her reaction. I've hired a private investigator, sweetie, to find out more about your father's situation. Ava's eyes widened. Is that really necessary? I mean, we already know he cheated. It's not just about the affair, Ava, I explained, my voice stronger than I felt. I need to know what else he might be hiding, for my own peace of mind and for our family's future. Ava sat down, her face a mix of emotions. I get it, Mom, I do, but are you sure you're ready for whatever he might find? Her question hit me hard. Was I ready? The truth was, I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't move forward without answers. I have to be, I said softly. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I threw myself into researching divorce laws, meeting with financial advisors, and trying to piece together a future I never thought I'd have to face. It was during one of these late-night research sessions that my phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Found something. Meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m. My heart raced as I walked into Jack's office the next day. He greeted me with a grim expression that made my stomach churn. "Mrs. Thompson," he began, "I've uncovered some concerning information about your husband's finances." He slid a folder across the desk. With shaking hands, I opened it, my eyes widening as I scanned the documents inside. "These are bank statements," I murmured, confusion clouding my mind. "But these amounts, they're huge. Where is all this money coming from?" Jack leaned forward, his voice low. "From what I've gathered, your husband has been involved in some questionable business dealings, possibly embezzlement." The room spun around me. Embezzlement? Adam? It seemed impossible, and yet. "There's more," Jack continued, his tone gentle but firm. "The woman he's been seeing, Gwendolyn, she's not just a co-worker. She's the CEO's daughter." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the unexplained business trips. It all made a horrible kind of sense. "Mrs. Thompson," Jack said, pulling me from my seat, "given the nature of these findings, I have to ask, what do you want to do next?" I stared at the damning evidence before me, my mind racing. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. This was about illegal activities, about a man I thought I knew turning out to be a stranger. In that moment, I knew I had a choice to make. I could confront Adam, risk tipping him off and potentially losing everything, or I could bide my time, gather more evidence, and ensure that when I made my move, it would be decisive. Looking up at Jack, I felt a steely resolve settle over me. "I want to know everything," I said, my voice steady. "Every detail, every transaction, and then I'm going to make sure Adam pays for what he's done." As I left Jack's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Adam. "We need to talk. Dinner tonight?" Little did he know, our conversation was about to take a very different turn than he expected. I sat in my car outside the upscale restaurant, my heart pounding. Adam's text inviting me to dinner had been unexpected, but I saw it as an opportunity to confront him, to see if he'd come clean about Gwendolyn and his shady business dealings. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car. As I entered the restaurant, I spotted Adam at a corner table, looking nervous. "Good, Laura," he said, standing as I approached. "Thank you for coming." I sat down, my face a mask of calm I didn't feel. "You said we needed to talk, Adam. So talk." He fidgeted with his napkin, avoiding my gaze. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Laura, about us, about our marriage. I think we should try to work things out." I almost laughed. After everything, this was his play? "Work things out? Work things out?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "And how exactly do you propose we do that, Adam? Should we just pretend you didn't cheat on me, that you didn't destroy our family?" Adam's face paled. "Laura, please, I know I made mistakes, but—" "Mistakes?" I interrupted, my anger finally boiling over. "Is that what you call sleeping with your boss's daughter? Embezzling money from your company?" His eyes widened in shock. How did you?" "I hired a private investigator," I said, relishing the fear that flashed across his face. "I know everything, Adam. About Gwendolyn, about the money, all of it." Adam slumped in his chair, defeat written across his features. "Laura, I can explain." "Save it," I snapped. "I don't want to hear your excuses. What I want to know is why. Why did you do it, Adam? Was our life together not enough for you?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly old and tired. I don't know. It started small, just a few numbers moved around. Then Gwendolyn found out, and she blackmailed me, said she'd tell her father if I didn't keep it going." I felt a surge of disgust. "So you slept with her to keep her quiet? And kept stealing to, what, buy her silence?" Adam nodded miserably. "I never meant for it to go this far, Laura. I swear I was going to tell you everything, find a way to make it right." "Make it right?" I laughed bitterly. "There's no making this right, Adam. You've broken our marriage, our family, and the law. Do you have any idea what this means for us, for our children?" The mention of Ava and Michael seemed to hit Adam hard. "The kids," he whispered. God, what have I done? As I watched my husband crumble before me, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also pity. and beneath it all, a steely resolve. "I'm leaving you, Adam," I said, my voice steady. "I'm filing for divorce and I'm taking the kids. You need to turn yourself in, confess to the embezzlement before they find out on their own." Adam's head snapped up, panic in his eyes. "Laura, please, you can't. If this gets out, I'll lose everything. My job, my freedom." "You should have thought of that before you started stealing," I cut him off. "You have a choice to make, Adam. Turn yourself in or I'll go to the police myself." As I stood to leave, Adam grabbed my arm. "Wait, Laura, please, just give me some time. Let me try to fix this." I looked down at him, this man I once loved, now a stranger. "You have 48 hours, Adam. After that, I'm doing what I have to do to protect our family." Walking out of the restaurant, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my life. The road ahead would be hard, but I was ready to face it. My phone buzzed with a text from Ava. "Everything okay, Mom? How did it go with Dad?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation to come. It was time to tell my children the whole truth, no matter how painful. As I drove home, I realized that this was just the beginning. The real fight was yet to come, but I was ready for it, ready to reclaim my life, protect my children, and face whatever challenges lay ahead. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The 48-hour ultimatum I'd given Adam ticked away like a time bomb. I spent those hours in a frenzy of activity, meeting with lawyers, gathering documents, and steeling myself for what was to come. As the deadline approached, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever happened next, I was ready. I just finished explaining everything to Ava and Michael when my phone buzzed. Adam's name flashed on the screen. "Laura," his voice was tight with panic. "I need more time. Please, I'm trying to fix this." I closed my eyes, fighting back a wave of anger. "Fix what, Adam? The affair? The embezzlement? Our broken marriage?" "All of it," he pleaded. "I've talked to Gwendolyn. We can make this right. Just give me a chance." A bitter laugh escaped me. "A chance? Like the chances I gave you for years while you destroyed our family?" "Mom?" Ava's concerned voice cut through my anger. I realized I'd been gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles had turned white. "I'm done giving you chances, Adam," I said, my voice steady. "You have until midnight. Turn yourself in, or I go to the police." I hung up, my heart pounding. Ava and Michael exchanged worried glances. "What now, Mom?" Michael asked, his voice small. I took a deep breath. "Now, we wait." The hours crawled by. We sat in tense silence, jumping at every sound. As the clock struck 11, a sharp knock at the door made us all start. I opened it to find two stern-faced police officers. "Mrs. Thompson?" one asked. "We need to ask you some questions about your husband." My stomach dropped. "Has something happened to Adam?" The officer's face remained impassive. "Ma'am, your husband has been arrested. We have reason to believe you may have information about his activities." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Adam? Arrested? Despite everything, I never thought he'd actually face consequences. "Mom?" Ava's voice trembled. "What's going on?" I turned to my children, their faces pale with shock. "It's okay," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Everything's going to be okay." The next few hours were a blur of questions, statements, and barely contained panic. By the time the police left, promising to return with more questions, I felt hollowed out. "I can't believe Dad's really going to jail," Michael muttered, staring blankly at the wall. Ava nodded, her eyes red-rimmed. "What are we going to do now?" Their words hit me like a physical blow. In my determination to see justice done, I'd forgotten about the collateral damage. My children's lives were about to be turned upside down, their father branded a criminal. As if on cue, my phone rang again. An unknown number. "Hello?" I answered warily. "Is this Laura Thompson?" A smooth, feminine voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Gwendolyn Carter," the voice replied, sending a chill down my spine. "I think it's time we talk, don't you?" I gripped the phone tighter, my mind racing. Gwendolyn, Adam's mistress, the catalyst for this whole mess. What could she possibly want now? "I'm listening," I said, my voice cold. "Not over the phone," Gwendolyn replied. "Meet me at the Bluebird Cafe in an hour. Come alone. Trust me, you'll want to hear what I have to say." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that I should stay far away from Gwendolyn and her machinations. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that this might be my chance to get answers, to understand the full scope of Adam's betrayal. I looked at Ava and Michael, their faces etched with worry and confusion. Could I really leave them now, when they needed me most? But if there was any chance Gwendolyn had information that could help us navigate this nightmare, didn't I owe it to my children to find out? "I have to go out for a bit," I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Will you two be okay here?" They nodded, clearly sensing the gravity of the moment. As I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice. Whatever happened at this meeting with Gwendolyn, I knew our lives would never be the same again. With one last look at my children, I stepped out into the night, ready to face whatever came next. The Bluebird Cafe was nearly empty when I arrived, my nerves frayed and my heart racing. In a corner booth sat a striking blonde woman, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on the table. Gwendolyn. As I approached, she looked up, a cold smile playing on her lips. "Laura, so nice to finally meet you." I slid into the booth, my voice tight. "Let's skip the pleasantries. What do you want?" Gwendolyn's smile widened. "Straight to the point. I like that." She reached into her purse, pulling out a thick manila envelope. "I have something you might be interested in." My eyes narrowed. "And what's that?" "Evidence," she said, sliding the envelope across the table. "Proof that Adam wasn't the mastermind behind the embezzlement. He was just a pawn." My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside were documents, bank statements, and emails that painted a damning picture. Not just of Adam's involvement, but of a larger conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of the company. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my mind reeling. Gwendolyn leaned forward, her voice low. "Because I'm tired of being used. Adam, my father, the whole company, they've been playing me just as much as they've been playing you." I stared at her, disbelief warring with a growing sense of understanding. "So what do you want from me?" "A partnership," she said, her eyes glinting. "Together, we can bring the whole corrupt system down, clear Adam's name, partially at least, and expose the real criminals." My head spun. This was so much bigger than I'd imagined. "And why should I trust you?" Gwendolyn's face hardened. "Because right now, I'm the only friend you've got. Adam's in jail, your kids are scared, and you're in way over your head. Face it, Laura, you need me." As much as I hated to admit it, she was right. I was out of my depth, and this evidence could change everything. But could I really trust the woman who had helped destroy my marriage? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Mom, where are you? The police are back. They're asking about Dad's computer. What should we do?" Panic surged through me. I stood abruptly, gathering the documents. "I have to go. My kids." Gwendolyn grabbed my arm. "Wait, you can't leave now. We need to plan our next move." I yanked my arm away. "My children come first. Always." As I rushed out of the cafe, Gwendolyn called after me. "You can't protect them forever, Laura. Sooner or later, you'll have to choose." Her words echoed in my head as I sped home, my mind racing. Choose what? Between justice and family? Between truth and protection? I arrived home to find 2 police officers in my living room, Ava and Michael looking pale and scared. "Mrs. Thompson," one officer said, his face grim. "We need to search your husband's home office. We have reason to believe there's evidence of further criminal activity." I clutched my purse tighter, feeling the weight of Gwendolyn's documents inside. "Do you have a warrant?" The officer's eyes narrowed. "We can get one, but that would make things messier for everyone involved." I looked at my children, saw the fear and confusion in their eyes. Then I thought of Adam, sitting in a jail cell, of Gwendolyn and her offer of alliance, of the years I'd spent building this life, only to watch it crumble around me. In that moment, I realized Gwendolyn was right. I did have to choose, not between justice and family, but between being a victim and taking control. I straightened my spine, meeting the officer's gaze. "You want a search? Fine, but first there's something you need to see." As I pulled out Gwendolyn's documents, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Whatever happened next, I was done being a pawn in someone else's game. It was time to become the queen. "Officers," I said, my voice steady, "I think we're going to need a lawyer, because this goes way beyond my husband's embezzlement, and I'm ready to tell you everything." The courtroom was packed as I took the stand, my heart pounding but my resolve unshakable. Months of preparation, sleepless nights, and emotional turmoil had led to this moment. As I raised my right hand to swear in, I caught Adam's eye from the defendant's table. He looked broken, a shell of the man I once loved. "Mrs. Thompson," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court about the events leading up to your discovery of your husband's illegal activities." I took a deep breath and began my testimony. With each word, I felt stronger, shedding the last vestiges of the meek housewife I'd once been. I detailed Adam's affair, the embezzlement, and the wider conspiracy that Gwendolyn's documents had revealed. As I spoke, I saw the jury's expressions shift from skepticism to shock, then to outrage. Adam's lawyer tried to discredit me, painting me as a vengeful ex-wife, but I stood my ground. "Mrs. Thompson," he sneered, "isn't it true that you're just trying to punish your husband for his infidelity?" I met his gaze steadily. "No, sir, I'm here because it's the right thing to do, for justice, for my children, and for myself." The trial lasted weeks, each day bringing new revelations and challenges. Gwendolyn testified, her composed facade cracking as she detailed her father's involvement in the scheme. Adam, facing overwhelming evidence, finally broke down and confessed to everything. On the day of the verdict, I sat with Ava and Michael, holding their hands tightly as we waited. When the jury foreman stood, the room fell silent. "We find the defendant, Adam Thompson, guilty on all counts." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. I closed my eyes, feeling a mix of relief and sadness wash over me. It was over. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed us, shouting questions. I pulled Ava and Michael close, shielding them as best I could. "Mom," Ava whispered, "what happens now?" I smiled at her, feeling a newfound strength. Now we rebuild. In the months that followed, our lives transformed. Adam went to prison, his relationship with Gwendolyn imploding spectacularly in the wake of the trial. The children struggled at first, but with time and therapy, they began to heal. As for me, I discovered a resilience I never knew I possessed. I went back to school, finishing the degree I'd abandoned when I married Adam. I started a support group for women dealing with similar situations, channeling my pain into purpose. One sunny afternoon, as I sat in our new apartment, helping Michael with his college applications, I realized how far we'd come. The phone rang. It was Ava, calling with news of her promotion at work. "I'm so proud of you, sweetie," I said, my heart swelling with love and pride. After hanging up, I walked to the window looking out at the city skyline. I thought about the woman I'd been when this all started. Scared, insecure, defined by her roles as wife and mother. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and fiercely independent. A knock at the door interrupted my reverie. I opened it to find my mother, Ellen, holding a bottle of champagne. "I thought we could celebrate," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Your new job, the kids' successes, and—" she paused, smiling warmly, "your divorce being finalized." I laughed, pulling her into a hug. "You always know just what I need, Mom." As we sat together, sipping champagne and chatting, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The road had been hard, filled with betrayal, heartache, and challenges I never thought I'd face. But I'd survived. More than that, I'd thrived. Looking at my mother, I saw the strength that had always been there, waiting for me to claim it. I thought of Ava and Michael, of the example I was setting for them. And I thought of Adam, hoping that someday he'd find the peace and redemption he sought. But most of all, I thought of myself. Laura Thompson, no longer defined by her marriage or her pain, but by her courage, resilience, and unwavering love for her family. As the sun set outside our window, casting a golden glow over the room, I raised my glass in a silent toast. To endings and new beginnings. To family and friendship. To the power of forgiveness and the strength found in adversity. And most of all, to the woman I'd become. Battle-scarred but unbroken, ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. The sound of Anne's heels clicking against the hardwood floor sent a shiver down my spine. I took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and turned to face my mother-in-law as she strode into our living room like she owned the place. "Laura, darling," Anne cooed, air-kissing my cheeks. "The apartment looks quaint. I suppose you've done the best you can with what you have." I bit my tongue, reminding myself that this was a gift from my parents. "Thank you, Anne. We're quite happy here." Ethan emerged from the bedroom, our 3-year-old son Riley perched on his hip. "Mom, you're early. We weren't expecting you for another hour. Anne waved a dismissive hand. Oh, you know me. I couldn't wait to see my boys. She reached for Riley, who buried his face in Ethan's shoulder. Come on, champ, Ethan said, prying Riley loose. Say hello to Grandma. I watched as Anne smothered Riley with kisses, leaving lipstick marks on his chubby cheeks. The poor kid looked like he wanted to crawl out of his skin. So, Anne said, setting Riley down and turning her attention back to me. When are you two planning on giving me another grandchild? This place is certainly big enough for another little one. I forced a laugh. Oh, Anne, we're not quite ready for that yet. Riley keeps us plenty busy. Anne's eyes narrowed. Nonsense. You're not getting any younger, dear, and Ethan always wanted a big family, didn't you, sweetheart? Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Mom, we've talked about this. Lara and I will decide when we're ready for more kids. I'm just saying, Anne persisted. You don't want to wait too long. You know what they say about geriatric pregnancies. I felt my cheeks flush with anger and embarrassment. Before I could respond, Riley tugged on my pant leg. Mama hungry. Grateful for the distraction, I scooped him up. Let's get you a snack, buddy. Ethan, why don't you show your mother around? As I escaped to the kitchen, I heard Anne's voice trailing behind me. Really, Ethan, you should consider moving to a house in our neighborhood. It would be so much better for the children. I gripped the counter, trying to steady my nerves. This was supposed to be a quick visit, but I had a sinking feeling it was just the beginning. Everything okay? Ethan asked, appearing in the doorway. I forced a smile. Fine, just getting Riley his snack. Ethan lowered his voice. Look, I know my mom can be a bit much, but she means well. Can you just try to get along? For me? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Ethan gave me a quick peck on the cheek before returning to the living room. As I cut up an apple for Riley, I could hear Anne's voice growing louder. Really, Ethan, I don't know why you insist on staying in this shoebox. Your father and I have plenty of room at our place. You could save so much money living with us. I froze, the knife hovering over the cutting board. This was new. Anne had never outright suggested we move in with them before. Mom, Ethan said, his voice strained, we're happy here, end of discussion. I peeked around the corner to see Anne's face twist into a pout. I'm only thinking of what's best for my family. Is that so wrong? The tension in the room was palpable. I cleared my throat, desperate to change the subject. Who's ready for that tour? As we moved from room to room, Anne's criticisms flowed freely. The paint colors were too dark, the furniture too modern, the artwork not nearly sophisticated enough. With each comment, I felt my resolve weakening. By the time Anne finally left, promising to return soon for a longer visit, I was exhausted. I collapsed onto the couch, Riley curling up beside me. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. That wasn't so bad, was it? I stared at him incredulously. Are you serious? She practically invited herself to move in with us. She's just lonely since Dad's been sick, Ethan said defensively. We should make more of an effort to include her. As Ethan's words sank in, a chill ran down my spine. Something told me this was just the beginning of a much bigger problem. The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake. I fumbled for it in the dark, my heart racing as I saw Anne's name on the screen. Lara? It's Brian. He's in the hospital. I sat up, instantly alert. What happened? A stroke, Anne's voice cracked. They don't know. I need you and Ethan here. Now. Within the hour, we were at the hospital. Riley left with a neighbor. The harsh fluorescent lights made Anne look older, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Oh, thank God you're here, she said, pulling Ethan into a tight embrace. I stood awkwardly to the side, unsure of my place in this family crisis. As we waited for news, Anne's composure crumbled. I don't know what I'll do if, she trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. Despite our differences, I found myself reaching out to squeeze her hand. He's strong, Anne. He'll pull through. The doctor finally emerged, his face grave. Mr. Thompson is stable, but he's suffered significant damage. He'll need round-the-clock care for the foreseeable future. Anne's grip on my hand tightened. Of course, we'll hire the best nurses, whatever it takes. The doctor shook his head. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Mr. Thompson will need a level of care that's difficult to provide at home. I'd recommend a long-term care facility. Absolutely not. Anne interrupted. My husband is coming home with me, and that's final. As the doctor tried to reason with her, I saw the wheels turning in Anne's mind. I knew what was coming before she even opened her mouth. "Lara, dear," she said, turning to me with a sickeningly sweet smile. "You're not working right now, are you? Surely you could help me care for Brian. It would mean so much to have family around during this difficult time." I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. "Mom, we can't just uproot our lives. Can't we?" Anne's voice took on a sharp edge. "After everything your father and I have done for you, that apartment you're living in rent-free, the least you could do is help when we need you most." I watched the conflict play out on Ethan's face. I knew he felt indebted to his parents, but this was asking too much. "We'll figure something out," I said, trying to diffuse the tension. "But moving in isn't." "I think it's a great idea," Ethan interrupted. I stared at him in disbelief. "What?" "Think about it, Lara. We'd be saving money. Riley would get to spend more time with his grandparents. It makes sense." I felt like I was drowning, my carefully constructed life crumbling around me. "Ethan, can we talk about this in private?" We stepped into the hallway, leaving Anne to fuss over Brian's unconscious form. "Have you lost your mind?" I hissed. "We can't move in with your parents." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a sure sign he was stressed. "It's temporary, Lara, just until Dad's back on his feet." "And how long will that be? Months, years? What about our life, our home?" "This is family," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "Sometimes we have to make sacrifices." I felt a surge of anger. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one who will be playing nurse and housekeeper to your mother all day. Is that really all you care about, your comfort?" Ethan's eyes flashed with disappointment. "I thought you were better than that, Lara." His words stung, but before I could respond, Anne appeared in the doorway. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her eyes darting between us. Ethan straightened his shoulders. "Everything's fine, Mom. We'd be happy to move in and help out." Anne's face lit up with triumph. "Oh, I knew I could count on you both. We'll get started on the arrangements right away." As Anne launched into plans for our move, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me, trapped, powerless, and utterly alone. I stared at the boxes piled high in Anne and Brian's guest room, our entire life condensed into cardboard containers. The weight of our decision pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. "Lara, where did you put Riley's favorite blanket?" Ethan called from downstairs. I sighed, digging through a nearby box. "Coming." As I descended the stairs, I caught sight of Anne hovering over Brian in his hospital bed, now set up in the living room. Her saccharine voice grated on my nerves. "Oh, Brian, darling, isn't it wonderful having the whole family under one roof?" I bit my tongue, handing the blanket to Ethan without a word. He barely glanced at me, too preoccupied with setting up Riley's play area. "Lara," Anne chirped, "be a dear and fetch Brian's medication, would you? It's time for his next dose." I nodded, retreating to the kitchen. As I sorted through the pill bottles, I heard the doorbell ring. "I'll get it," I called, grateful for any excuse to escape. I opened the door to find a woman about my age, holding a casserole dish. "Hi there. I'm Jenna, your next-door neighbor. I thought I'd bring over a welcome dish." Relief washed over me at the sight of a friendly face. "That's so kind of you. I'm Lara. Would you like to come in for a cup of coffee?" Before Jenna could respond, Anne appeared behind me. "Who's this, Lara?" I introduced Jenna, watching Anne's eyes narrow as she sized up our new neighbor. "How lovely," Anne said, her tone anything but. "I'm sure Lara would love to chat, but we're quite busy settling in. Perhaps another time?" I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Actually, Lara," Ethan interrupted. "Mom needs help with Dad's physical therapy. Can you come here?" Jenna gave me a sympathetic smile. "No worries. We'll catch up soon, okay?" As I closed the door, I felt the last of my freedom slipping away. The days blurred together, a monotonous cycle of caring for Brian, catering to Anne's demands, and trying to keep Riley entertained. Ethan grew more distant, spending long hours at work and barely acknowledging me when he was home. One afternoon, while Anne was napping and Brian was stable, I snuck out to the backyard. I needed air, space, anything to clear my head. "Sst, Lara!" I turned to see Jenna waving from over the fence. "Hey, neighbor. Fancy meeting you here in your own yard," she teased. I managed a weak smile. "It feels like the first time I've seen daylight in weeks." Jenna's expression softened. "That bad, huh?" Before I knew it, I was spilling everything. The move, the tension with Ethan, Anne's constant criticism. Jenna listened without judgment, offering tissues when the tears started falling. "Lara, honey, you can't keep living like this," she said gently. "Have you thought about leaving?" I stared at her, shocked. I can't. Ethan needs me. Riley needs his father." Jenna shook her head. "What about what you need? You're disappearing, Lara. I can see it happening right in front of me." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was right. I was losing myself, piece by piece. "Lara," Anne's shrill voice cut through the air. "Where are you? Brian needs his bath." I closed my eyes, steeling myself. "I should go." Jenna reached across the fence, squeezing my hand. "Think about what I said, okay? You deserve better than this." As I turned to go back inside, I caught sight of Ethan watching from an upstairs window. The look of disappointment on his face made my stomach churn. That night, as we lay in bed, Ethan finally spoke. "I saw you talking to the neighbor today." "Her name is Jenna," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mom says she's been filling your head with nonsense, telling you to leave us." I sat up, anger flaring. "So you're spying on me now?" Ethan's face hardened. "Someone has to keep an eye on you. You've been neglecting your duties, Lara. Mom's had to pick up your slack." "My duties?" I spat. "I'm your wife, Ethan, not your servant." "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "You'll wake Riley." I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and irreversible. Ethan's face contorted in shock, then anger. "A divorce? Are you out of your mind, Lara?" I stood my ground, heart pounding. "I'm serious, Ethan. I can't live like this anymore." He scoffed, running a hand through his hair. "This is ridiculous. You're just tired. Get some sleep, and we'll talk in the morning." But I knew there was no going back. I grabbed a pillow and headed for the door. "I'll sleep in Riley's room tonight." As I settled onto the small couch in Riley's room, my mind raced. How would I manage on my own? Where would we go? The questions swirled until exhaustion finally pulled me under. The next morning, I woke to Riley's gentle pats on my cheek. "Mama, why are you sleeping here?" I forced a smile. "Just wanted to be close to you, sweetie. Let's get you dressed." As we made our way downstairs, the tension in the house was palpable. Anne's eyes narrowed as she saw me. "Ethan told me about your outburst last night," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I hope you've come to your senses." I ignored her, focusing on getting Riley his breakfast. Ethan appeared, looking haggard. "Lara, can we talk?" he asked, gesturing to the patio. Once outside, he sighed heavily. "Look, I know things have been tough, but divorce? That's not the answer." I steeled myself. "It is for me, Ethan. I'm not happy. I haven't been for a long time." "And what about Riley? Have you thought about what this would do to him?" The guilt hit me like a wave, but I pushed through. "Of course I have. But staying in an unhappy marriage isn't good for him either." Ethan's face hardened. "If you do this, you'll regret it. My parents have connections. They'll make sure you never see Riley again." The threat sent a chill down my spine. Before I could respond, Anne's voice called from inside. "Ethan, the movers are here." Confused, I followed Ethan back into the house. Two burly men stood in the entryway, clipboards in hand. "What's going on?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Anne smiled sweetly. "Oh, didn't Ethan tell you? We've decided to sell your apartment. It's time for a fresh start, all together." The room spun. You can't do that. My parents gave us that apartment." "As a wedding gift," Ethan interjected. "And since you're so keen on ending our marriage, I'd say it's fair game." I felt the walls closing in. Our apartment, my safe haven, was being ripped away, and with it any chance of independence. "You planned this," I whispered, the realization dawning. "You knew I was unhappy, so you trapped me here." Anne's smile turned predatory. "Now, Lara, don't be dramatic. We're family. This is what's best for everyone." I watched helplessly as the movers began packing up our life. Riley tugged at my sleeve, confusion in his eyes. "Mama, where are our things going?" I knelt down, fighting back tears. They're coming here, sweetie. We're going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a while." As I held Riley close, I caught sight of Jenna through the window. She waved, concern etched on her face. I managed a weak smile, but inside I was screaming. Later that night, as the house finally quieted, I slipped out to the backyard. Jenna was there, waiting. "Lara, what's going on? I saw the movers earlier." "The dam broke, and I told her everything. The forced move, Ethan's threats, the loss of our apartment. Jenna listened, her expression growing more horrified. Lara, this is abuse. You need to get out of there. How? I choked out. They've taken everything. I have nowhere to go, no money of my own. Jenna reached across the fence, gripping my hand tightly. Listen to me. I have a friend who's a lawyer. She specializes in cases like yours. Let me call her. As I nodded, a light flicked on upstairs. Ethan's silhouette appeared in the window, watching us. I have to go, I whispered urgently. Jenna squeezed my hand one last time. Be ready. We're getting you out of there. As I crept back inside, my heart raced with equal parts fear and hope. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of control returning. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't go down without a fight. The next morning, I woke with a newfound determination. Jenna's words echoed in my mind, giving me strength. I had to act, and fast. As I made breakfast, Anne hovered nearby, her eyes following my every move. I hope you've reconsidered your foolish notion of divorce, Lara. It would be such a shame to tear this family apart. I bit my tongue, focusing on Riley's cereal. Ethan walked in, his face a mask of indifference. Morning, he mumbled, barely glancing at me. I took a deep breath. Ethan, we need to talk, privately. Anne's eyes narrowed, but she retreated to Brian's room. Ethan sighed, following me to the patio. What is it now, Lara? I steeled myself. I'm leaving. Today. And I'm taking Riley with me. Ethan's face contorted with anger. Like hell you are. You have nowhere to go, no money, you're nothing without us. His words stung, but I stood my ground. I've contacted a lawyer. She's helping me file for divorce and emergency custody. Ethan's laugh was cold. Good luck with that. My parents' lawyers will bury you. I have evidence, Ethan, I said, my voice shaking, of the emotional abuse, the manipulation, the way you and your mother have isolated me. His face paled. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone, playing a recording of last night's conversation. Ethan's threats echoed in the quiet morning air. You bitch, he hissed. You'll regret this. Before I could respond, a scream pierced the air. We rushed inside to find Anne standing over Brian's bed, her face ashen. He's not breathing, she wailed. The next few hours passed in a blur. Paramedics arrived, but it was too late. Brian was gone. As the coroner took Brian's body away, I retreated to Riley's room, holding him close. The weight of what I had to do pressed down on me. A soft knock at the door startled me. It was Anne, her eyes red-rimmed. Lara, she said, her voice hoarse. I need you. We all do. Please, let's put this nonsense behind us, for Brian's sake. For a moment I wavered. The grief in her eyes was real, and part of me ached to comfort her. But then I remembered the months of manipulation, the constant belittling, the way she and Ethan had conspired to trap me here. I'm sorry for your loss, Anne, I said softly, but I can't stay. It's not healthy for me or for Riley. Anne's face hardened. You ungrateful little. Everything okay in here? Ethan appeared in the doorway, his eyes darting between us. I nodded, gathering Riley in my arms. We're fine. I was just telling your mother that Riley and I will be staying at a hotel tonight. We need some space. Ethan's jaw clenched. Now isn't the time for this, Lara. We need to plan the funeral, deal with Dad's estate. And we will, I interrupted. But not here. Not like this. As I moved to leave, Ethan grabbed my arm. You're not taking my son anywhere. Riley whimpered, burying his face in my neck. The sound seemed to snap Ethan out of his rage. Fine, he spat. Go. But this isn't over. I hurried downstairs, my heart pounding. As I reached for the door, Anne's voice stopped me cold. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. You'll never see a penny of Brian's money, and I'll make sure everyone knows what an abandoning whore you are. I turned to face her, surprised by the calm that washed over me. Goodbye, Anne. As I stepped outside, Jenna was waiting in her car, engine running. You ready? She called. I nodded, buckling Riley into the back seat. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of Ethan and Anne in the rearview mirror, their faces a mix of fury and disbelief. Where to? Jenna asked. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few years lifting. Anywhere but here. As we drove away from the house that had become my prison, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was free to choose my own path. The hotel room felt like a sanctuary after the chaos of the past few days. Riley slept peacefully in the adjoining room while I pored over documents with Sarah, Jenna's lawyer friend. These recordings are damning, Laura, Sarah said, her brow furrowed. But Ethan's family has deep pockets. They'll fight dirty. I nodded, steeling myself. I'm ready. What's our next move? A sharp knock at the door made us both jump. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. My heart raced as I saw Ethan standing there, his face a mask of barely contained rage. Laura, open the damn door. Sarah squeezed my arm. Don't, I'll call security. But as she reached for her phone, another voice joined Ethan's, Anne's. Laura, darling, please, we just want to talk. Against my better judgment, I cracked the door open, the security chain still in place. What do you want? Ethan's eyes were bloodshot, his hair disheveled. You can't do this. You can't take my son away. Our son, I corrected, my voice stronger than I felt. And I'm not taking him away. I'm protecting him. Anne pushed forward, her face a picture of concern. Sweetheart, we're worried about you. This isn't like you, running away, hiring lawyers. Come home, we can work this out as a family. For a moment I almost wavered. The familiar pull of their manipulation tugged at me. But then I remembered the months of gaslighting, the isolation, the constant belittling. No, I said firmly. We're done. The divorce papers have been filed. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Ethan's face contorted with fury. You think you can win? My family will destroy you. You'll never see Riley again. As he lunged forward, the security chain snapped taut. Sarah appeared behind me, her phone in hand. Step back, or I'm calling the police, she warned. Anne's saccharine smile faltered. Now, there's no need for that. We're all adults here. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I have something to say, and then I want you both to leave. They fell silent, watching me warily. I know about the affair, Anne. The color drained from Anne's face. Ethan turned to his mother, confusion etched in his features. What is she talking about? I pressed on, my heart pounding. I have proof. Emails, hotel receipts, photos, all while Brian was sick. While you were guilting me into caring for him, you were off with your lover. Anne's composure cracked. You little bitch, you've been snooping through my things? Ethan stumbled back, his world visibly crumbling. Mom? Is this true? I closed the door, muffling their voices. Sarah stared at me, wide-eyed. That wasn't in our strategy, she whispered. I know, I replied, my hands shaking, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. As Sarah called hotel security, I sank onto the bed, the adrenaline leaving me in a rush. What had I done? Hours later, after Ethan and Anne had been escorted from the premises, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. You've ruined everything. I hope you're ready for war. I showed the message to Sarah, who immediately began typing on her laptop. We'll file for a restraining order first thing in the morning, she said. But Laura, you need to be prepared. This is going to get ugly. As if on cue, my phone lit up with notifications. Social media posts, texts from mutual friends, all asking about the rumors spreading online. Anne had wasted no time in launching her smear campaign. I curled up next to Riley, watching his peaceful face as he slept. The enormity of what lay ahead crashed over me. I had thrown the first punch, exposed Anne's deepest secret. But at what cost? As the night wore on, I wrestled with doubt and fear. Had I made the right choice? Could I really win against Ethan's family and their resources? But as the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I felt a resolve solidify within me. I had come too far to back down now. For Riley's sake, for my own, I had to see this through. Whatever came next, I would face it head on. The war had begun, and I was ready to fight. The courthouse loomed before me, its imposing facade a stark reminder of the battle ahead. I clutched Riley's hand tightly as we climbed the steps, Sarah and Jenna flanking us protectively. Remember, Sarah whispered, stay calm, no matter what they throw at you. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. As we entered the courtroom, I saw Ethan and Anne already seated, their expensive lawyer leaning in close, whispering strategy. The judge called the court to order, and the air crackled with tension. Ethan's lawyer stood, his voice dripping with false concern. Your Honor, we have grave concerns about the welfare of young Riley. Mrs. Thompson has shown erratic behavior, making unfounded accusations and fleeing the family home. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to shout out. Sarah squeezed my hand reassuringly before rising to speak. Your Honor, my client has extensive documentation of emotional abuse and manipulation at the hands of Mr. Thompson and his mother. We also have evidence of Mrs. Ann Thompson's infidelity during her husband's illness. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Anne's face turned ashen, while Ethan's jaw clenched visibly. The judge frowned. "These are serious allegations. I'd like to see this evidence immediately." As Sarah presented our case, I watched Ethan and Anne whisper furiously to their lawyer. The pit in my stomach grew with each passing moment. Suddenly, Ethan stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to speak." The judge nodded, and Ethan turned to face me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and something else. Desperation? "Lara," he said, his voice cracking, "I know I've made mistakes, we both have, but Riley needs both of us. Please, can't we work this out?" For a moment I wavered. The familiar pull of our shared history tugged at my heart, but then I remembered the months of gaslighting, the isolation, the constant belittling. "No, Ethan," I said firmly, "it's too late for that." Anne leapt to her feet. "You ungrateful little witch! After everything we've done for you." "Mrs. Thompson," the judge barked, "control yourself or I'll have you removed from this courtroom." As Anne sank back into her seat, her face contorted with rage, I felt a surge of strength. I stood, addressing the judge directly. "Your Honor, I've spent years trying to please this family, sacrificing my own happiness and well-being in the process. I'm not asking for money or revenge. I just want to raise my son in a healthy, loving environment." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "I've seen enough for today. We'll reconvene tomorrow for my decision." As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt a mix of relief and dread. What if the judge sided with Ethan? What if I lost Riley? Outside, reporters swarmed us, shouting questions about Anne's affair and the family's dirty laundry. Jenna and Sarah formed a protective barrier around Riley and me as we pushed through the crowd. Suddenly, I heard Ethan's voice behind me. "Lara, wait!" I turned to see him jogging towards us, his face a mask of anguish. "Please, can we talk? Just for a minute?" Against my better judgment, I nodded. "Jenna, can you take Riley to the car?" As soon as Riley was out of earshot, Ethan's demeanor changed. His eyes hardened, his voice low and menacing. "You think you've won? This is far from over. My mother has friends in high places. We'll make sure you never see Riley again." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," he snarled. "You've ruined everything. Now I'm going to ruin you." As he stormed off, I stood rooted to the spot, my world spinning. Sarah appeared at my side, her face etched with concern. "Lara? What happened? What did he say?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. The weight of Ethan's threat crashed over me, leaving me gasping for air. As we drove away from the courthouse, Riley chattering happily in the back seat, I stared out the window, my mind racing. How far would Ethan and Anne go to keep Riley? What lengths would I have to go to protect him? The war I had started was far from over. And as the sun set on this tumultuous day, I realized that the real battle was just beginning. The courtroom fell silent as the judge cleared his throat. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure everyone could hear it. Riley sat beside me, blissfully unaware of the gravity of this moment. "In the matter of Thompson versus Thompson," the judge began, "I've carefully considered all evidence presented. The accusations of emotional abuse, manipulation, and infidelity are deeply troubling." I held my breath, feeling Jenna's reassuring hand on my shoulder. "It is the decision of this court to grant full custody of Riley Thompson to Lara Thompson, with supervised visitation rights for Ethan Thompson." The room erupted in chaos. I sat stunned, tears of relief streaming down my face. Ethan leapt to his feet, shouting obscenities, while Anne wailed dramatically. "Order!" the judge bellowed. "Mr. Thompson, control yourself or you'll be held in contempt." As the bailiff escorted Ethan and Anne out, I hugged Riley close, whispering, "It's over, baby. We're going to be okay." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. I steeled myself, ready to face them head-on. "Mrs. Thompson, how do you respond to accusations that you fabricated evidence against your mother-in-law?" I took a deep breath. Every piece of evidence presented was thoroughly vetted by my legal team. The truth has prevailed today, and that's all that matters. As we pushed through the crowd, I caught sight of Anne being helped into a car, her face ashen. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her gaze: defeat. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Riley thrived in our new apartment, away from the toxic environment of his grandparents' home. I found a job I loved, rediscovering parts of myself I thought I'd lost. One crisp autumn day, as Riley and I walked hand in hand through the park, I spotted a familiar figure on a bench. It was Anne, looking years older than when I'd last seen her. "Lara," she called out weakly. "Please, can we talk?" Every instinct told me to keep walking, but something in her voice made me pause. "5 minutes," I said, sitting Riley down with his toys nearby. Anne's hands trembled as she spoke. "I've lost everything. Ethan barely speaks to me. The country club. Well, let's just say my social circle has shrunk considerably." I remained silent, waiting. "I know it's too late," she continued, "but I want you to know I'm sorry for everything. The way I treated you, the lies, the manipulation. I was so afraid of losing control that I ended up losing everything that mattered." I studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit. Finding none, I nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that, Anne. It doesn't change the past, but it means something." As I stood to leave, Anne reached out, her eyes pleading. "Do you think, someday, I might be able to see Riley again?" I took a deep breath, weighing my words carefully. "That's not my decision to make anymore. When Riley's older, if he wants to know you, I won't stand in the way. But for now, we need space to heal." Walking away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The last threads of resentment and anger loosened their grip on my heart. That night, as I tucked Riley into bed, he asked, "Mommy, are you happy?" I smiled, realizing the truth of my answer. "Yes, sweetheart, I really am." Later, curled up on the couch with a cup of tea, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the struggles, the moments of doubt, they had all shaped me into the woman I was now. Strong, resilient, free. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "Drinks tomorrow to celebrate your promotion?" I grinned, typing back a quick, "Absolutely." As I gazed out the window at the city lights, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities. For the first time in years, I was excited to see what it held. I had faced my demons, stood up to my oppressors, and come out stronger on the other side. The woman who had once felt trapped and powerless was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who knew her worth, and wasn't afraid to fight for it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new adventures. But tonight, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. Home. Safe. Free. And as I drifted off to sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. The best revenge isn't destruction or retribution. It's living well, on your own terms. And that's exactly what I intended to do. The doorbell chimed, shattering my peaceful morning like a hammer through glass. I knew who it was before I even reached the door. Only one person had the audacity to show up unannounced at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. "Patricia," I said, forcing a smile as I opened the door. What a surprise. My mother-in-law breezed past me, her designer perfume leaving a cloying trail in her wake. "Evelyn, dear, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop by to see how you're settling into your new role." The way she said role made it sound like a dirty word. I bit back a retort, reminding myself that I'd chosen this. I'd left my career to be a full-time housewife, to support Brian's growing business. It was my decision, even if Patricia couldn't fathom why anyone would make such a choice. "Coffee?" I offered, already moving towards the kitchen. "Oh, I suppose," Patricia said, her eyes scanning the living room with barely concealed judgment. "If you have time, I know how busy you must be, keeping house." I gritted my teeth as I prepared the coffee. When I returned, Patricia was running a finger along the mantelpiece, inspecting it for dust. "You know, Evelyn," she began, accepting the mug I offered, "I couldn't help but notice the state of Brian's shirts when he visited last week. Perhaps I could show you a better way to iron them?" "Brian's shirts are fine," I said, my voice tight. "He's never complained." Patricia clucked her tongue. "Oh, he wouldn't, would he? Such a good boy, always so considerate. But a wife should anticipate her husband's needs, don't you think?" I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. "Patricia, I appreciate your concern, but Brian and I are doing just fine. We have our own way of doing things." "I'm sure you do," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I just worry, you see. It's such a big adjustment, going from a career woman to this." She gestured vaguely at the room. "This is my choice," I said firmly, "and Brian supports me." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Does he? I wonder if he truly understands what he's given up. A wife who contributes financially, who has her own life outside the home. It's a lot to ask a man to shoulder all that responsibility." My hands clenched around my coffee mug, Brian and I made this decision together. We're partners. Of course, dear, Patricia said, patting my knee patronizingly. I'm sure you believe that. Now why don't you show me what you've done with the guest room? I had some ideas about redecorating. I stood up abruptly. Actually, Patricia, I have plans this morning. Perhaps we could do this another time? She looked affronted. Plans? What could be more important than family? I have a life outside of this house, I said, moving towards the door. And right now, I need to get ready to live it. Patricia gathered her things, her lips pursed in disapproval. Well, I can see I'm not wanted. I'll just have to tell Brian how inhospitable you were when he gets home. As soon as she was gone, I sagged against the closed door, exhaustion washing over me. That's when I noticed it. My journal, sitting on the side table, slightly askew from where I'd left it. With trembling hands, I picked it up, flipping to the most recent entry. There, in the margin, was a small pencil mark that hadn't been there before. My blood ran cold as realization dawned. Patricia had read my journal, my private thoughts about my struggles, adjusting to this new life, my fears and insecurities. She knew everything. In that moment, as anger and violation washed over me, I knew things would never be the same. Patricia had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. This meant war. I stormed out of the house, my mind reeling from Patricia's invasion of privacy. The crisp morning air did little to cool my anger as I marched down the sidewalk, no destination in mind. That's when I heard a friendly voice call out, "Evelyn, what's got you in such a tizzy this fine morning?" I turned to see June, my elderly neighbor, tending to her rose bushes, her weathered face creased with concern as she took in my flustered state. "Oh, June," I sighed, feeling the fight drain out of me. "It's my mother-in-law. She's just impossible." June patted the bench beside her. "Come, sit. Tell old June all about it." I hesitated for a moment, then relented. As I settled next to her, the words tumbled out. Patricia's surprise visit, her condescending remarks, and the shocking discovery that she'd read my private journal. June listened intently, her eyes narrowing as I recounted the morning's events. When I finished, she let out a low whistle. "That woman's got some nerve," she said, shaking her head. "Reminds me of my own mother-in-law, God rest her soul. She was a real piece of work, too." "How did you handle it?" I asked, desperate for any advice. June chuckled. "Not well at first, but I learned something important over the years. You've got to set boundaries, and you've got to stick to them." Boundaries? The concept seemed foreign when it came to Patricia. "Absolutely," June nodded firmly. "You need to have a frank conversation with her. Let her know in no uncertain terms that her behavior is unacceptable." The thought of confronting Patricia made my stomach churn. "I don't know if I can do that, June. She's Brian's mother, and I don't want to cause problems in the family." June's eyes softened. "Honey, she's the one causing problems. You have every right to protect your home and your peace of mind." As we talked, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. June's wisdom, born from years of experience, gave me strength I didn't know I had. "You know," June said, a mischievous glint in her eye, "my Harold always said the best defense is a good offense. Maybe it's time you took the fight to Patricia." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Well," June leaned in conspiratorially, "you could always give her a taste of her own medicine. Show up at her house unannounced, offer some unsolicited advice about her housekeeping." We both burst into laughter at the thought. As our giggles subsided, I felt a newfound resolve settling over me. "You're right, June," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I need to stand up for myself. I can't let Patricia walk all over me anymore." June squeezed my hand. "That's the spirit, dear. Remember, you're not just standing up for yourself. You're standing up for your marriage, for your future family." As I walked home, buoyed by June's support, I began formulating a plan. I'd confront Patricia, set clear boundaries, and make it abundantly clear that her behavior wouldn't be tolerated any longer. But when I reached my front door, I froze. There, taped to the wood, was a note in Patricia's elegant script. "Evelyn, I've taken the liberty of rearranging your linen closet. You'll find it's much more efficient now. We'll discuss your homemaking skills further at Sunday dinner. Patricia." My hands shook as I ripped the note from the door. How dare she enter my home without permission? Again. In that moment, all my carefully laid plans evaporated. This wasn't just about setting boundaries anymore. This was war. I stormed into the house, grabbed my phone, and dialed Brian's number. As it rang, I paced the living room, my free hand clenched into a fist. Hello? Brian's voice came through, tinged with concern. He must have sensed my mood even through the phone. Brian, I said, my voice trembling with barely contained fury, we need to talk about your mother, now. The tension in the room was palpable as I faced Patricia across the dining table. Brian sat beside me, his presence a comforting anchor in the storm that was about to break. Patricia, I began, my voice steadier than I felt, we need to talk about boundaries. Her eyebrows arched. Boundaries? I'm not sure I understand, dear. I took a deep breath. You've been overstepping, entering our home without permission, rearranging our things, and... I paused, steeling myself, reading my private journal. Patricia's face flushed, but she didn't deny it. I was only trying to help. As a mother, I have a right to ensure my son's home is well managed. No, you don't, Brian interjected, his voice firm. Mom, Evelyn and I are adults. We don't need your supervision. Patricia's eyes widened, shock evident on her face. Brian, surely you can't mean that. I've always had your best interests at heart. Your intentions don't justify your actions, I said. We're setting clear boundaries now. No more unannounced visits, no more helping without our permission, and absolutely no invading our privacy. Patricia's shock morphed into indignation. This is preposterous. I've done nothing but try to guide you both. Evelyn, you're the one causing a rift in this family with your modern notions and inability to keep a proper home. I felt Brian tense beside me, but I squeezed his hand, silently asking him to let me handle this. Patricia, this isn't about my homemaking skills or your guidance. It's about respect. We're asking you to respect our autonomy as a couple. For a moment, Patricia was silent, her eyes darting between Brian and me. Then her face hardened. I see. If that's how you feel, perhaps it's best if I limit my involvement in your lives. Mom, Brian started, but Patricia cut him off with a wave of her hand. No. I understand perfectly. You've made your choice clear. She stood, gathering her purse. But mark my words, Evelyn. This family needs stability, tradition. The only way you'll ever truly be part of it is if you give Brian a child, a son, preferably. Then maybe you'll understand the importance of family. Her words hit me like a slap. I stood up, anger coursing through me. How dare you? But Patricia was already heading for the door. She paused at the threshold, turning back with a vindictive smile. I'll be waiting for that announcement. Until then, enjoy your independence. The door slammed behind her, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Brian wrapped his arms around me as I sagged against him. I'm so sorry, Evelyn. I had no idea she'd react like that. I shook my head, fighting back tears. It's not your fault. But Brian, what she said about having a child. He pulled back, looking into my eyes. Hey, don't let her get to you. We'll have children when we're ready, not because my mother demands it. I nodded, but Patricia's words had planted a seed of doubt. What if she was right? What if I could never truly be part of this family without producing an heir? As if reading my thoughts, Brian cupped my face in his hands. You are my family, Evelyn. You're all I need. I managed a weak smile, but inside, my mind was racing. Despite our victory in setting boundaries, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Patricia's parting words echoed in my head, a sinister prophecy that threatened to overshadow our future. That night, as Brian slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my hand resting on my flat stomach. The thought that had been niggling at the back of my mind all evening finally crystallized into a startling realization. I was late, very late. My heart raced as I contemplated the possibility. Could I be pregnant? And if I was, how would this change things with Patricia? Would it bring peace to our family, or would it only give her more ammunition to interfere in our lives? As dawn broke, I made a decision. I would find out for sure, but I wouldn't tell Brian. Not yet. This was my secret to keep, at least until I figured out what it meant for our future. The pregnancy test trembled in my hands, 2 pink lines staring back at me. I was right. I was pregnant. A whirlwind of emotions swept through me. Joy, fear, excitement, and dread all tangled together in a complicated knot. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the bathroom sink. This was what we wanted, wasn't it? A family of our own. But Patricia's words echoed in my mind, casting a shadow over what should have been a moment of pure happiness. When I told Brian that evening, his face lit up with unbridled joy. He swept me into his arms, spinning me around our kitchen. "We're going to be parents," he exclaimed, his eyes shining with tears. I laughed, letting his excitement wash over me, pushing my worries aside for the moment. "Yes, we are." As the weeks passed, my belly grew, and so did Patricia's interference. It started small. A book on proper prenatal care left on our doorstep. Unsolicited advice about my diet slipped into conversation during Sunday dinners, but it quickly escalated. One afternoon, I came home to find Patricia in our nursery, directing a team of painters. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my hands instinctively cradling my swollen belly. Patricia turned, a serene smile on her face. "Oh, Evelyn, I'm just helping you get the nursery ready. Blue is the perfect color for a boy's room, don't you think?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "We don't know the gender yet, Patricia, and even if we did, we didn't ask for your help." Her smile faltered. "But surely you want a boy, to carry on the family name?" "We want a healthy baby," I said firmly. "Boy or girl?" Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You're being naive, Evelyn. A son is what this family needs. Brian needs an heir." I opened my mouth to argue, but a sharp pain in my abdomen made me gasp. Patricia was at my side in an instant, her face a mask of concern. "Are you all right? Should I call the doctor?" I waved her off, taking deep breaths until the pain subsided. "I'm fine, it's just stress." Patricia's expression softened. "You see, this is why you need my help. You're clearly overwhelmed." I straightened up, fixing her with a hard stare. "What I need is for you to respect our boundaries. Please leave, Patricia. Now." For a moment, I thought she might argue, but she simply pursed her lips and gathered her things. As she passed me, she paused. "I'm only trying to help, Evelyn. One day, you'll understand." After she left, I sank onto the couch, my hands shaking. The stress of dealing with Patricia was taking its toll, and I knew it wasn't good for the baby. That night, I confided in Brian about my concerns. He listened, his face growing more troubled with each word. "I had no idea it had gotten this bad," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I'll talk to her, make her understand." "No," I interrupted. "I don't think that's enough anymore, Brian. Your mother, she's not going to change, and I can't keep dealing with this stress. It's not good for me or the baby." Brian took my hands in his. "What are you saying?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to propose. I think I should go stay with my mother for the rest of the pregnancy." His eyes widened in shock. "Evelyn, no, this is our home, our family. We can't let my mother drive you away." "It's not about letting her win," I explained. "It's about doing what's best for our child. I need peace, Brian. I need to be able to enjoy this pregnancy without constantly looking over my shoulder." Brian was quiet for a long moment, his internal struggle visible on his face. Finally, he nodded slowly. "If that's what you need, then that's what we'll do. But Evelyn, promise me this is temporary. Promise me you'll come back." I leaned in, pressing my forehead to his. "I promise. This is our home, our family. I'm just taking a step back to protect it." As we sat there, holding each other, I felt a mix of relief and sadness wash over me. This wasn't how I imagined my pregnancy would be, but I knew in my heart it was the right decision. For now, at least, I would find sanctuary away from Patricia's overbearing presence. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind wondered, would this really solve our problems or just delay the inevitable confrontation? The gentle hum of my mother's sewing machine filled the quiet afternoon as I sat by the window, absently rubbing my swollen belly. It had been 3 weeks since I'd moved in with her, and the peace I'd found here was a balm to my frayed nerves. My phone buzzed, interrupting my reverie. Another message from Patricia. I hesitated before opening it, bracing myself for what I might find. "Evelyn, how could you abandon your home like this? Brian needs you. Are you so selfish that you'd put your own comfort above your family's needs?" I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath to calm the anger rising within me. This wasn't the first message of its kind, and I doubted it would be the last. "Everything okay, honey?" my mother asked, pausing her work. I forced a smile. "Just Patricia again. Nothing I can't handle." But as the days passed, Patricia's messages became more frequent and more vicious. Each one chipped away at my resolve, planting seeds of doubt in my mind. A real wife would be by her husband's side. "I always knew you weren't cut out for this family. That child deserves better than a mother who runs away from her responsibilities." One evening, As I sat on the porch swing, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Brian. "Hey, love. How are you feeling? Mom's been asking about you. She seems pretty upset that you're not here. Maybe we should reconsider this arrangement." My heart sank. Even here, hundreds of miles away, Patricia's influence was seeping into our lives, manipulating Brian's thoughts. I was about to respond when another message from Patricia came through. This one was different. Attached was a photo of our nursery, completely redecorated in garish shades of blue and green. "Since you're not here to prepare for my grandson, I took the liberty of doing it myself. I hope you appreciate all I'm doing for this family in your absence." Something inside me snapped. The constant barrage of guilt-tripping messages, the manipulation of Brian, and now this blatant disregard for our wishes. It was too much. With shaking hands, I pulled up Patricia's contact information. My finger hovered over the block button as a war raged within me. Was this too drastic? Would it cause irreparable damage to our family? But then I felt a strong kick from my baby, as if urging me on. In that moment, clarity washed over me. This wasn't just about me anymore. I had to protect my child from Patricia's toxic influence. I pressed block. A wave of relief washed over me, followed quickly by a pang of guilt. I dialed Brian's number, knowing I owed him an explanation. "Evelyn, is everything okay?" His voice was laced with concern. "Brian, I just blocked your mother's number," I said, my voice trembling slightly. There was a long pause on the other end. "Oh," he finally said. "I see. I'm sorry, but I had to. The constant messages, the guilt-tripping, the redecorating of the nursery without our permission, it's too much. I need to focus on our baby now, not on managing your mother's feelings." I heard Brian sigh heavily. "I understand. I'm sorry it came to this. I should have done more to shield you from her." "It's not your fault," I assured him. "But Brian, we need to talk about what happens after the baby is born. I won't bring our child into an environment where Patricia feels she can overstep our boundaries at will." "You're right," Brian said, his voice firm. "When you come home, things will be different. I promise." As we talked, making plans for our return and discussing how to handle Patricia going forward, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt truly hopeful about our future. That night, as I lay in bed, my hands resting protectively over my belly, I made a silent vow to my unborn child. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I would always put their well-being first. Patricia might be family by marriage, but this little one was flesh of my flesh, and I would move heaven and earth to give them the peaceful, loving home they deserved. The first cry of my newborn daughter filled the delivery room, and in that moment, all the pain and exhaustion melted away. I looked up at Brian, tears streaming down his face as he cut the umbilical cord. Our little Emily had arrived, perfect and beautiful. As I cradled her in my arms, a sense of peace washed over me. The struggles with Patricia seemed a distant memory. This was our new beginning. 3 days later, we were ready to go home. As Brian pulled into our driveway, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Home, our sanctuary, but also the battleground where we'd faced so many conflicts with Patricia. "Ready?" Brian asked, squeezing my hand. I nodded, clutching Emily close to my chest as we walked to the front door. The moment we stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air felt different, stale somehow. "Brian," I whispered, "did you leave any windows open?" He shook his head, his brow furrowing as he looked around. That's when I noticed it, the empty spaces where my things used to be. My grandmother's antique vase gone from the mantel. The painting we'd bought on our honeymoon missing from the wall. "What the hell?" Brian muttered, moving quickly through the house. I followed him, my heart pounding. As we entered our bedroom, I gasped. My jewelry box was gone, along with the vintage dresser it had sat on. Even my clothes were missing from the closet. "This can't be happening," I said, my voice trembling. "We were robbed?" Brian's face had turned ashen. "No," he said quietly. "Look." He pointed to a note on the bed. With shaking hands, I picked it up, recognizing the elegant script immediately. "Evelyn and Brian, I've taken the liberty of clearing out some of the clutter in your home. You'll find it's much more suitable for raising a child now. I've sold the unnecessary items. Consider it a lesson in responsibility and prioritizing what truly matters in life. I look forward to meeting my grandchild. Love, Patricia." The paper crumpled in my fist as a wave of fury washed over me. She sold my things? She broke into our home and sold my possessions? Brian was already on the phone, pacing the room. Mom, what have you done? No, you had no right. This is theft, Mom. Do you understand that? As he argued with Patricia, I sank onto the bed, clutching Emily to my chest. She began to fuss, sensing my distress. I tried to soothe her, but my own emotions were spiraling out of control. This was supposed to be our homecoming, our fresh start. Instead, Patricia had violated our space, our trust in the most egregious way possible. Brian ended the call, his face a mask of anger and disbelief. She says she did it for us, to teach us about responsibility. She won't tell me where she sold the items. I stood up, my body shaking with rage. This ends now, Brian. I won't let her terrorize us anymore. I won't let her anywhere near Emily. Evelyn. No, I cut him off. No more excuses, no more second chances. We need to confront her, face to face, and this time there will be consequences. Brian nodded slowly, his jaw set. You're right, this has gone too far. We'll go to her house right now. As we prepared to leave, I looked down at Emily, peacefully asleep in her carrier. My resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting our daughter, our family. We drove to Patricia's house in tense silence. As we pulled up, I saw her peering out the window, a smug smile on her face. She thought she'd won, that we'd come crawling back, grateful for her interference. How wrong she was. I stepped out of the car, Emily in one arm, my other hand clenched in a fist. This was it, the moment of reckoning. As we approached the front door, I knew that whatever happened next would change our family forever. And I was ready for it. The door swung open, and there stood Patricia, her face a mask of false concern. Oh, you're here. I was so worried when you didn't call. Come in, let me see my granddaughter. I clutched Emily tighter to my chest, my body tensing. Not so fast, Patricia. We need to talk about what you've done. Her smile faltered for a moment before returning, brittle and forced. What I've done? I've only been helping, dear. You'll see. Helping? Brian's voice was low and dangerous. You call breaking into our home and selling our possessions helping? Patricia's eyes widened in feigned innocence. Breaking in? Don't be ridiculous, Brian. I have a key, and I was merely decluttering for the baby's sake. I felt my anger rising, threatening to boil over. Those weren't your things to declutter, Patricia. You had no right. I had every right, she snapped, her facade cracking. I'm family. I'm trying to teach you responsibility, to show you what really matters. You should be thanking me. Brian stepped forward, placing himself between Patricia and me. Mom, what you did was illegal. It was a violation of our privacy and our trust. We want our things back. Now. Patricia's face hardened. I'm afraid that's not possible. I've already sold most of it. The room seemed to spin around me. All those precious memories, gone. I felt tears pricking at my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Then you'll pay us back, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Every penny. Patricia laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. With what money? Everything I had went into raising Brian, into supporting this family. You owe me, if anything. Brian's shoulders tensed. No, Mom, we don't owe you anything. Not anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's eyes darted between us, realization slowly dawning on her face. What are you saying? She whispered. Brian took a deep breath. We're saying that this ends now. You're no longer welcome in our home. You're no longer a part of our lives. Patricia stumbled back as if she'd been struck. You can't mean that. I'm your mother. A mother respects boundaries, I said. A mother supports her children, not terrorizes them. You've shown us that you can't be trusted, Patricia. We won't let you hurt our family anymore. Tears welled up in Patricia's eyes, but I steeled myself against them. How many times had she used those tears to manipulate us? Brian, she pleaded, reaching for her son. You can't do this. I'm all alone. I need you. For a moment, I saw Brian waver. This was his mother, after all, the woman who had raised him. But then he looked at me, at Emily sleeping peacefully in my arms, and his resolve hardened. No, Mom, you need help, but not from us. Not anymore. We're leaving now, and I don't want you to contact us again. Patricia's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful children, after everything I've done for you. You'll regret this, mark my words. As we turned to leave, Patricia lunged forward, her hands outstretched towards Emily. If you're going to abandon me, at least let me hold my granddaughter one last time. I reacted instinctively, twisting away to shield Emily. In the process, I lost my balance, stumbling backwards. Time seemed to slow as I felt myself falling. Emily clutched tightly to my chest. Brian's strong arms caught me just before I hit the ground. Emily woke with a startled cry, and the sound seemed to snap Patricia out of her frenzy. She stood there, hands still outstretched, horror dawning on her face as she realized what she'd almost done. "Get out," Brian growled, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Get out now, or I swear I'll call the police." As we hurried to our car, Emily's cries piercing the night air, I looked back one last time. Patricia stood in the doorway, a small, broken figure silhouetted against the light. In that moment, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a deep, aching sadness for what could have been, and the knowledge that our lives would never be the same again. 6 months passed without a word from Patricia. Brian and I focused on our new life with Emily, cherishing every moment of parenthood. The peace we'd found was healing, but the shadow of Patricia's actions still lingered. Then on a crisp autumn morning, a letter arrived. I recognized the handwriting immediately, my heart racing as I opened it. "Dear Evelyn and Brian, I hope this letter finds you well. I'm writing to you from a place of deep reflection and regret. The past months have been difficult. I've lost my job, my home, and most importantly, my family. I realize now the gravity of my actions and the pain I've caused. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I truly believed I was acting in your best interests. I see now how wrong I was. If you're willing, I'd like to meet, to apologize in person and to make amends if possible. With love and remorse, Patricia." I showed the letter to Brian, watching his face as he read. "What do you think?" I asked softly. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Evelyn. Part of me wants to believe her, but after everything—" I nodded, understanding his hesitation. "Maybe we should meet her, hear her out at least." A week later we sat in a neutral coffee shop, Emily sleeping peacefully in her stroller. When Patricia walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the imperious woman who had terrorized our lives. In her place was someone who looked small, tired, and deeply sad. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she sat down. Brian nodded stiffly. "You said you wanted to apologize." Patricia took a deep breath. "Yes, I'm so sorry, for everything. I see now how my actions were not just misguided, but cruel and destructive. I was so caught up in my own ideas of what was best that I couldn't see the damage I was causing." She turned to me, tears in her eyes. "Evelyn, I treated you abominably. I was jealous of your relationship with Brian, threatened by the changes in his life. Instead of supporting you both, I tried to control everything. I'm truly deeply sorry." I felt a lump forming in my throat. "Patricia, you hurt us deeply. You violated our trust, our home, our privacy. How can we ever trust you again?" She nodded, wiping away a tear. "I know. I don't expect you to trust me. I don't even expect you to forgive me. I hope that maybe someday we can find a way to have some kind of relationship. For Emily's sake, if nothing else." Brian leaned forward, his face serious. "Mom, we appreciate your apology, but you need to understand, things can never go back to how they were. If we decide to allow you back into our lives, it will be on our terms with clear boundaries that you must respect." Patricia nodded eagerly. "Of course, anything. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I acted the way I did. I want to be better, for all of you." As we talked, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The anger and resentment I'd been carrying began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious hope. We didn't forgive Patricia that day. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But we took the first steps towards healing. We agreed to occasional, supervised visits with Emily. Patricia would continue her therapy, and we would take things slowly, one day at a time. As we left the coffee shop, Brian squeezed my hand. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked down at Emily, still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the complex emotions swirling around her. Then I looked at Brian, the man who had stood by me through it all. "You know what? I think I am," I said, smiling. "We've been through so much, but we've come out stronger. Whatever happens with your mother, I know we can handle it together." Brian pulled me close, kissing the top of my head. "Together," he agreed. As we walked home, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. But we had each other. We had our beautiful daughter, and we had the strength that comes from overcoming adversity together. In the end, that was all that mattered. We were a family, bound not just by blood but by love, respect, and the shared experience of fighting for what truly matters. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew we would face them united, stronger than ever before. The lipstick stain on Richard's collar told me everything I needed to know. I stood in our bedroom, his crumpled dress shirt dangling from my trembling fingers, my world crashing down around me. "Laura, have you seen my blue shirt?" Richard's voice echoed from downstairs. I swallowed hard, composing myself. "I'm ironing it now, honey." I lied, my voice unnaturally high. I shoved the shirt into the hamper and grabbed another from his closet, my mind racing. As I descended the stairs, Richard appeared at the bottom, looking impatient. "There you are. I'm running late for my meeting." I handed him the fresh shirt, studying his face. Did he look guilty? Nervous? I couldn't tell anymore. "Here you go. Have a good day at work." He pecked me on the cheek, the scent of his cologne making my stomach churn. "Thanks, babe. Don't forget Ava has soccer practice at 4. "I know," I said, forcing a smile. "I've got it covered." As soon as the front door closed behind him, I sagged against the wall, my mind whirling. How long had this been going on? Who was she? And how could I have been so blind? My phone buzzed, startling me. It was a text from Alice, my best friend. "Coffee at Rosie's in 20?" I hesitated, then typed back, "See you there." At the cafe, Alice waved me over to our usual corner table. Her smile faded as she saw my face. "Laura, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I slumped into the chair across from her. "I think Richard's cheating on me." Alice's eyes widened. "What? No way. Richard would never." "I found lipstick on his collar," I cut her off. "And it's not the first time I've suspected something. He's been working late, taking mysterious phone calls." Alice reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. Are you sure it's not just a misunderstanding?" I shook my head, tears threatening to spill. I don't know what to think anymore. I feel like I'm losing my mind. "Have you talked to him about it?" "No," I admitted. "I'm scared of what he might say. What if he leaves me? What about the girls?" Alice's face softened. "Laura, you can't live like this. You need to confront him." Just then, my phone rang. It was the school. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Nurse Jenkins. Lily's running a fever. Can you come pick her up?" I sighed, gathering my things. "I'll be right there." Alice stood up with me. "Go take care of Lily. And Laura, promise me you'll talk to Richard tonight." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I hurried out of the cafe, my mind was a jumble of worries and fears. How could I face Richard? What would happen to our family? At the school, I found Lily curled up on a cot in the nurse's office, her cheeks flushed. "Mommy," she whimpered, reaching for me. I scooped her up, feeling her forehead. "It's okay, baby, we're going home now." As we walked to the car, my phone buzzed again. A text from Richard, "Working late tonight, don't wait up." My stomach clenched. Another late night, another lie. At home, I tucked Lily into bed and called my mother. "Mom, can you watch the girls tonight? I need to talk to Richard." "Of course, dear," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Is everything all right?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure. I'll explain later." After Mom arrived, I paced the living room, rehearsing what I'd say to Richard. The clock ticked past 8, then 9. Still no sign of him. At 10:30, headlights swept across the front window. I steeled myself as the key turned in the lock. Richard stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. "Laura, what are you still doing up?" I stood, my heart pounding. "We need to talk, Richard." He frowned, swaying slightly. "Can't it wait until morning?" "No," I said firmly. "It can't." As I opened my mouth to continue, Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling. "Who is she, Richard?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His eyes met mine, a mixture of guilt and defiance. "I don't know what you're talking about." But I knew. In that moment, I knew everything had changed, and I was ready for a fight. The morning after my confrontation with Richard, I woke up with a pounding headache and a hollow feeling in my chest. He'd slept on the couch, and I heard him shuffling around downstairs, probably getting ready for work. I couldn't face him. Not yet. I reached for my phone, desperate to talk to someone who would understand. Alice answered on the second ring. "Laura? Are you okay? You never called me back last night." I took a deep breath. I confronted Richard. It didn't go well. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to come over? No, I have to get the girls ready for school, but can we meet for lunch? I really need to talk. Of course, Rosie's at noon. I agreed and hung up, feeling a small measure of relief. At least I had Alice to lean on. The morning passed in a blur of school lunches and rushed goodbyes. Richard left without a word, just a guilty glance in my direction. By the time I got to Rosie's, I was a bundle of nerves. Alice was already there, a steaming mug of coffee waiting for me. Spill, she said as soon as I sat down. I poured out everything. The lipstick, the late nights, the suspicious text messages. Alice listened, her face a mask of sympathy and shock. I can't believe Richard would do this to you, she said, shaking her head. You and the girls deserve so much better. I don't know what to do, Alice. I can't just leave him. What about Ava and Lily? Alice reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You have to think about yourself, too. You can't stay in a marriage where you're not respected. I nodded, fighting back tears. But how do I even start? I've been with Richard for so long. I don't know who I am without him. You're Laura Thompson, Alice said firmly. You're a fantastic mother, a brilliant HR executive, and my best friend. You're strong enough to get through this. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Your husband is cheating on you. Meet me at the park on Oak Street at 3 p.m. if you want proof. My hands shook as I showed Alice the message. What do I do? She frowned. It could be a trap, but don't you want to know for sure? I bit my lip, torn between fear and the desperate need for answers. Will you come with me? Alice nodded without hesitation. Of course, Quajos, I've got your back, always. The rest of lunch passed in a haze of anxiety. At 2:55, Alice and I arrived at the park, scanning the area for anyone suspicious. There, Alice pointed to a bench where a woman sat, her face hidden by large sunglasses and a scarf. As we approached, the woman stood up. Laura? I nodded, my heart racing. She handed me an envelope. I'm sorry, she said softly before hurrying away. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Richard, with another woman, kissing, holding hands, entering a hotel. My stomach lurched as I flipped through them. Oh, Laura, Alice whispered, her face pale as she looked over my shoulder, but I barely heard her. My eyes were fixed on one photo in particular, the woman with Richard. I knew that dress, that hair. I looked up at Alice, my world tilting on its axis. It's you, I whispered. Alice's eyes widened in panic. Laura, I can explain. But I was already backing away, the photos clutched to my chest, my best friend's betrayal burning like acid in my throat. Laura, please. Alice called after me as I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car, locking the doors and letting out a primal scream of rage and pain. How could they do this to me? My husband and my best friend? As I sat there, shaking and sobbing, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Now you know the truth. What are you going to do about it? I stared at the message, a cold determination settling over me. They thought they could destroy my life? Well, two could play at that game. It was time for Laura Thompson to fight back. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. The betrayal of Richard and Alice burned in my chest, but I couldn't fall apart now. I had to pick up the girls from school. As I pulled into the school parking lot, my phone rang. It was Gary, Alice's husband. My stomach clenched. Laura? Have you heard from Alice? She's not answering her phone. I swallowed hard. Should I tell him? I saw her earlier at lunch. Is everything okay? Gary's voice was tight with worry. There's been a fire at our house. I can't reach her, and I'm stuck in traffic. Can you check if she's there? My world tilted again. A fire? Of course, Gary. I'll head there right now. I called my mother, asking her to pick up the girls. Then I sped towards Alice and Gary's neighborhood, my mind racing. As I turned onto their street, I saw the flashing lights of fire trucks and ambulances. Smoke billowed from their beautiful two-story home. I parked haphazardly and ran towards the scene. A firefighter tried to stop me, but I pushed past him. My friend might be in there. That's when I saw them. Richard and Alice, huddled together near an ambulance, looking shell-shocked. They were alive, but their clothes were singed, and Alice had an oxygen mask over her face. Relief warred with fury inside me. I stormed over to them, my hands shaking. What the hell is going on? Richard's eyes widened when he saw me. Laura, I can explain. Explain what? I hissed. How you and my best friend nearly got yourselves killed, how you've been lying to me for God knows how long. Alice pulled off her oxygen mask, tears streaking her soot-stained face. Laura, please. It's not what you think. I laughed bitterly. Really? Because I think it's exactly what I think. I saw the photos, Alice. I know everything. Richard stepped forward, reaching for me. Photos? What photos? I jerked away from him. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me. A commotion behind us made us all turn. Gary had arrived, his face a mask of panic and confusion as he took in the scene, his partially destroyed house, his wife with another man. Alice, he called out, pushing through the crowd. What's going on? Are you okay? Alice's face crumpled. Gary, I'm so sorry. I watched as Gary's expression shifted from concern to understanding, then to devastation. My heart ached for him, even as my own pain threatened to overwhelm me. A police officer approached us. We need to ask you all some questions about the fire. It appears to have been deliberately set. The world seemed to stop. Arson? I looked at Richard and Alice, seeing the guilt and fear in their eyes. What had they done? As the officer led us away to separate us for questioning, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face in the crowd. It was the woman from the park, the one who had given me the photos. She nodded at me once, then disappeared into the throng of onlookers. In that moment, I realized this was far from over. The fire, the affair, the mysterious woman, it was all connected somehow, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The officer gestured for me to follow him. Mrs. Thompson, if you could come with me, please. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. As I walked away from the smoldering ruins of Alice and Gary's home, and the smoking remains of my own marriage, I knew my life would never be the same. But I was ready to fight for the truth, for my daughters, and for myself. Whatever came next, Laura Thompson would face it head-on. The officer opened the door of his cruiser. After you, ma'am. I slid into the back seat, my mind already racing with questions. As the door closed behind me, I caught one last glimpse of Richard and Alice, huddled together in the chaos. This was just the beginning. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room made my head throb. I'd been here for hours, waiting for news about Richard and Alice's condition after the fire. The police had finished questioning me, but my mind was still reeling from everything that had happened. A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Thompson? Your husband is awake now. You can see him if you'd like. I nodded, steeling myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. As I walked down the sterile hallway, my anger and hurt bubbled up inside me, threatening to spill over. Richard was propped up in bed, his face pale against the white sheets. When he saw me, his eyes widened with a mixture of guilt and fear. Laura, he started, but I cut him off. Don't, I said, my voice low. I don't want to hear your excuses or your lies. I want the truth, Richard, all of it. He sighed, deflating like a punctured balloon. I never meant for any of this to happen, but it did happen, I snapped. You and Alice, how long? Richard looked away. 6 months. The admission hit me like a physical blow. 6 months of lies, of betrayal. I sank into the chair beside his bed, my legs suddenly weak. Why? I whispered. Why her? Why throw away our entire life together? I don't know, he said, and I could hear the genuine confusion in his voice. It just happened. Alice and I, we connected in a way that... Stop. I held up a hand. I don't need to hear about your connection. What I need to know is what happened at the house. The police think it was arson, Richard. Did you have something to do with that? His eyes widened in shock. What? No, of course not. We were just talking. Then suddenly there was smoke everywhere. We barely made it out. I studied his face, searching for any sign of deception, but all I saw was fear and remorse. Laura, he reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I'm so sorry, for everything. I know I've ruined everything, but maybe we can. No, I said firmly, standing up. There's no we anymore, Richard. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. Richard's face crumpled, but I felt a strange sense of relief. It was out there now. There was no going back. What about the girls? He asked quietly. I'll be filing for full custody, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. You can have supervised visitation, but that's it. You've proven you can't be trusted. Richard opened his mouth to argue, but a commotion in the hallway interrupted us. I turned to see Gary bursting into the room, his face a mask of fury. "You bastard!" he yelled, lunging for Richard. I stepped between them, pushing Gary back. "Gary, stop! This isn't the place." He glared at me. "Did you know? Were you covering for them?" "No," I said softly. "I just found out too. I'm so sorry, Gary." The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a bone-deep weariness I recognized all too well. "What are we going to do?" he asked, his voice breaking. I took a deep breath, making a decision that would change all our lives. "We're going to fight back. Together. Richard, Alice, whoever started that fire, they're not going to get away with this." Gary nodded slowly, a spark of determination igniting in his eyes. "You're right. We deserve better than this." I turned back to Richard, who was watching us with a mixture of fear and resignation. "I'll have my lawyer contact you," I said coldly. "Goodbye, Richard." As Gary and I walked out of the hospital room, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was on the right path. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head-on. The days following the hospital confrontation passed in a blur of lawyer meetings and hushed phone calls. I'd managed to keep the girls shielded from the worst of it, but I knew I couldn't protect them forever. As I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers my lawyer had just delivered, my phone buzzed with a text from Gary. "We need to talk. Meet me at Rosie's in an hour?" I hesitated, then replied, "I'll be there." At the cafe, Gary looked as haggard as I felt. He slid into the booth across from me, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I found out something disturbing." I leaned forward, my heart racing. Gary pulled out his phone, showing me a series of text messages. "These are from Alice's phone. I shouldn't have looked, but I had to know." As I scrolled through the messages, my blood ran cold. They were between Alice and Richard, discussing not just their affair, but something far more sinister. "Oh my God," I whispered. "They were planning to leave us, to take the kids and disappear." Gary nodded grimly. "There's more. Look at the last few messages." I kept reading, my hands shaking. The final texts were about the fire, confirming what I'd feared all along. It wasn't an accident. "They set the fire themselves," I said, my voice barely audible, "to collect the insurance money and fund their new life." Gary's face was a mask of pain and anger. "We can't let them get away with this, Laura. We have to do something." Just then, my phone rang. It was the hospital. "Mrs. Thompson, it's about your husband. He's demanding to be released, but we need your consent as his emergency contact." I looked at Gary, an idea forming in my mind. "Don't release him," I told the nurse. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. As we rushed to the hospital, I filled Gary in on my plan. It was risky, but it might be our only chance to get the truth. At the hospital, we found Richard arguing with a nurse. When he saw us, his face paled. "Laura, what are you doing here? And why is he with you?" I stepped forward, my voice steady. "We know everything, Richard. About the affair, the fire, your plans to take the kids. It's over." Richard's eyes darted between us, panic setting in. "You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We never meant to hurt anyone." "But you did," Gary growled. "You betrayed us. You put lives at risk. For what? Money?" Richard slumped back onto the bed, defeated. "Alice said it was the only way, that we needed a fresh start, away from all the lies." I felt a surge of anger. "And what about our children, Richard? Did you think about what this would do to them?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, Laura. I've made such a mess of everything." Just then, a commotion in the hallway caught our attention. Alice burst into the room, her face wild with panic. "Richard, don't say another word," she cried. Then she saw Gary and me, and her expression crumpled. "Oh, God, you know." The four of us stood there, the weight of betrayal and destruction heavy in the air. I looked at Gary, seeing my own pain and determination mirrored in his eyes. In that moment, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. I pulled out my phone and dialed. "This is Laura Thompson. I need to speak to Detective Johnson about the arson case. I have some new information." As I spoke to the police, I watched Richard and Alice's faces crumble with the realization that their carefully constructed plans were falling apart. This was it, the point of no return. Whatever happened next, I knew our lives would never be the same. But for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, the chance for justice and a new beginning. The hospital room crackled with tension as Detective Johnson finished taking our statements. Richard and Alice sat on opposite sides of the room, their faces ashen. Gary stood beside me, a silent pillar of support. "Mr. Thompson, Miss Carter," the detective said, his voice grave. "Based on the evidence and your confessions, you're both under arrest for arson and insurance fraud." As the officers moved to handcuff them, Richard's eyes met mine, pleading. "Laura, please, think of the girls. We can work this out." I felt a surge of anger. "You should have thought of them before you decided to burn down a house and abandon your family." Alice sobbed as she was led away. "Gary, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." Gary's jaw clenched, but he remained silent. As Richard and Alice were escorted out, Detective Johnson turned to us. "We'll need you both to come down to the station for further questioning." I nodded, my mind racing. "Of course, but first I need to make arrangements for my daughters." Outside the hospital, I called my mother. "Mom, I need you to keep the girls overnight. Something's happened." After explaining the situation, I hung up, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. Gary touched my arm gently. "Are you okay?" I shook my head, fighting back tears. "I don't know how I'm going to tell the girls their father's been arrested. How do you explain something like that to children?" Gary's eyes softened with understanding. "We'll figure it out together. You're not alone in this, Laura." At the police station, hours passed in a blur of questions and paperwork. As we were finally preparing to leave, my lawyer arrived, looking grim. "Laura, we need to talk," she said, pulling me aside. "Richard's lawyer is already pushing for a plea deal. They're trying to use your children as leverage." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" "They're threatening to drag out the divorce proceedings, fight for custody, unless you agree to a more favorable settlement for Richard." I felt the room spin. After everything he'd done, Richard was still trying to manipulate me through our children. Gary overheard and stepped closer. "That's blackmail. They can't do that, can they?" My lawyer sighed. "Legally, no, but they can make things very difficult and drawn out." I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. When I opened them, I saw Gary watching me with concern. In that moment, I made a decision. "No," I said firmly. "I won't let him use our daughters as pawns. We fight this all the way." My lawyer nodded, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "It won't be easy, but I think it's the right call. I'll start preparing our counter-strategy immediately." As we left the station, the weight of the day's events hit me full force. I stumbled, and Gary caught my arm. "Whoa, easy there," he said softly. "Let's get you home." In the car, I finally broke down, sobs racking my body. Gary pulled over and simply held me, letting me cry. When I finally calmed down, I looked up at him. "How did we get here, Gary? How did our lives fall apart so completely?" He shook his head, his own eyes glistening. "I don't know, but we're going to get through this. Together." As we pulled up to my house, I saw my mother's car in the driveway. The girls were home. Reality crashed back in. I had to tell them about their father. Gary squeezed my hand. "Do you want me to come in with you?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "No, I need to do this alone. But can you come by tomorrow?" "I think I'm going to need all the support I can get." He nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "I'll be here. Whatever you need, Laura." As I walked to my front door, I felt like I was heading into battle. The hardest conversation of my life awaited me on the other side. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. Whatever came next, I knew I had the strength to face it. I opened the door, ready to face my new reality head-on. The courtroom buzzed with tension as I sat beside my lawyer, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. Across the aisle, Richard glared at me, his eyes cold and unforgiving. The judge cleared his throat, silencing the room. "In the matter of Thompson versus Thompson, we're here to discuss the terms of alimony and child support," the judge announced. My lawyer stood, her voice steady. "Your Honor, given Mr. Thompson's recent legal troubles and the circumstances surrounding the dissolution of the marriage, we believe full custody should be awarded to my client with supervised visitation for Mr. Thompson." Richard's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. My client's legal issues are separate from his ability to parent. We're seeking joint custody." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Counselor, your client is facing arson charges. How do you propose he co-parent from jail?" As the lawyers argued, I felt a gentle touch on my arm. Gary had slipped into the seat behind me, offering silent support. I gave him a grateful smile. Suddenly, the courtroom doors burst open. Alice stumbled in, looking disheveled and frantic. "Wait! I need to speak!" The judge banged his gavel. "Order, ma'am! You can't just barge in here." Alice ignored him, her eyes wild as she approached the bench. "You don't understand. It wasn't Richard's fault. I was the one who started the fire." The room erupted in chaos. Richard's face paled, while his lawyer looked like he might faint. I sat there, stunned, as Alice continued her confession. "Richard tried to stop me, but I wouldn't listen. I thought if we had the insurance money, we could start over, but it was all my idea." The judge called for order, his face stern. "Miss Carter, are you aware that you're confessing to a felony in open court?" Alice nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I just couldn't let Richard take the blame anymore. Our children deserve to know the truth." As the bailiff led Alice away, the judge turned to the lawyers. "In light of this new information, we'll need to recess. We'll reconvene in 1 hour." Outside the courtroom, my head was spinning. Gary stood beside me, his face a mix of shock and concern. "Laura, are you okay?" I shook my head, struggling to process what had just happened. "I don't know. I thought I had it all figured out, but now?" My lawyer approached, looking grim. "Laura, we need to talk strategy. This changes everything." As she outlined our options, I found my thoughts drifting to Ava and Lily. How would this affect them? How could I protect them from all this chaos? Suddenly, I saw Richard walking towards us, his lawyer trailing behind him. My body tensed, ready for another confrontation. But when he reached us, his face was different, softer, somehow. "Laura, can we talk? Alone?" Against my better judgment, I nodded. We stepped aside, away from the others. Richard took a deep breath. "I know I've made a mess of everything, but I want you to know, I never stopped loving our girls, or you." I felt tears pricking at my eyes. "Richard, it's too late for that." He nodded, looking defeated. "I know, but I want to make this right, for the girls. Whatever you decide about custody, I'll support it. No more fights, no more lawyers. Just tell me what you need." I stood there, overwhelmed by the sudden shift. Part of me wanted to lash out, to make him hurt the way I had. But another part, the part that remembered the man I'd fallen in love with, saw a glimmer of that person in his eyes. "I need time," I said finally. "To think, to process all of this. Can you give me that?" Richard nodded, relief washing over his face. "Of course, whatever you need." As he walked away, I felt a strange mix of emotions washing over me. Anger, confusion, a tiny spark of hope. I turned back to Gary and my lawyer, both watching me with concern. "What now?" Gary asked softly. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "Now, we fight for what matters most. My daughter's future." As we walked back into the courtroom, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Whatever happened next, I knew I had the strength to face it. For myself and for my girls. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in months, I felt like I might just win the war. The moving truck rumbled away, leaving me standing in the driveway of my new home. Ava and Lily raced inside, their excited squeals echoing through the empty rooms. I took a deep breath, savoring the crisp autumn air and the sense of possibility that came with it. "Need a hand with those boxes?" I turned to see Gary walking up the path, a warm smile on his face. Over the past few months, he'd become an unexpected source of strength and friendship. "I'd love some help, thanks," I said, grabbing a box. As we carried the last of our belongings inside, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Richard. "Hope the move went well. The girls settled in okay?" I hesitated before replying. "They're excited. Thanks for asking." Our relationship had evolved into a cautious co-parenting arrangement. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than I'd ever imagined during those dark days of the divorce. "Mom, can we set up our rooms now?" Lily called from upstairs. "Coming, sweetie," I called back, then turned to Gary. "Want to stay for dinner? It's just pizza, but—" He nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'd like that." As we worked on unpacking, my mother arrived, arms laden with homemade casseroles. "I thought you could use some real food," she said, kissing my cheek. The house slowly came to life with laughter and chatter. As I watched Ava showing Gary how to properly arrange her stuffed animals, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. This wasn't the family I'd imagined, but it was beautiful in its own way. Later that evening, after the girls were in bed and Gary had gone home, I sat on the porch with my mother, sipping tea. "You know," she said softly, "I'm so proud of you, Laura. You've handled all of this with such grace." I felt tears prick at my eyes. It doesn't feel like grace most days. I still get so angry sometimes thinking about what Richard and Alice did. Mom squeezed my hand. "That's normal, dear, but look at what you've built from the ashes of that betrayal. You're stronger now, and your girls are thriving." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I gasped as I read the headline: "Local business owners face bankruptcy after failed insurance scam." The article detailed Richard and Alice's financial downfall, their reputations in tatters. For a moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, quickly followed by pity. They'd lost everything, while I'd gained a new life. "What is it?" Mom asked, concerned. I showed her the article, watching as her eyes widened. "Oh, Laura, how do you feel about this?" I took a deep breath, surprised by my own response. "Honestly, I feel free, like the last tie to that old life has been cut." Mom nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You've come so far, sweetheart. Your father would be so proud of you." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the moments of despair. But I also thought about the strength I'd found, the friendships that had deepened, and the love that had sustained me. As I looked out at the quiet street of my new neighborhood, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was full of promise. "You know," I said softly, "I think we're going to be okay." Mom squeezed my hand. "More than okay, dear. You're going to thrive." I smiled, feeling the truth of her words in my bones. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I had the strength to face them. And I had a family, not the one I'd expected, but one built on love, trust, and resilience. As I headed inside to check on the girls one last time, I paused in the doorway, looking back at the life I'd left behind. Then, with a small smile, I stepped forward into my new beginning, ready to embrace whatever came next. The door closed softly behind me, the sound of a chapter ending and a new one beginning. In the quiet of my new home, surrounded by the love of my daughters and the support of true friends, I felt a surge of hope for the future. It wasn't the happily ever after I'd once dreamed of, but it was real, it was mine, and it was beautiful.